everyone.
We're ready to go live.
Okay, welcome to the regular meeting of the San Rafael City Council for Tuesday, January 19th, 2021. I'll request the city clerk to call the roll call, please.
Councilmember Bushy.
Present.
Councilmember Kurtz.
Present.
Councilmember Lorenz Galati.
Present.
Mayor Kate.
Present. So all the members of the council are here today. So before we get into the agenda, I would just want to have a few opening remarks. Today's meeting takes place between two important days. Yesterday was a celebration of Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy, and tomorrow our nation will inaugurate a new administration. MLK said, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." And in reaction to the recent attacks on our nation capital, President-elect Biden said it was, quote, "an unprecedented assault on our democracy," unquote. As you may know, those of you who are watching, all of us on the virtual dais on the council, as well as our city clerk and city attorney, we've taken a sworn oath to support and uphold both the California and United States Constitution. These are the documents that support our democracy. And I have to say that's democracy with a small letter D at the front, because practicing democratic ideals is a nonpartisan activity, just like our local government. And recalling the words of Martin Luther King Jr., I'm proud that our council is committed to working towards justice, and we recognize that there are many voices and viewpoints in our city. I want to thank and appreciate everyone who's participating tonight, whether you call in or have written in or are going to write in to provide input, or even if you're simply watching Facebook while you're eating your dinner. You are part of the democratic process, and we are glad you are here. In closing, we acknowledge that the present day San Rafael is traditionally home to the Coast Miwok people, many of whom today are tribal citizens of the Federated Indians of Great Rancheria. We thank the original caretakers of this land and honor their continuing involvement in stewardship practices that benefit us all. And thank you to all the staff. For those watching at home, just a reminder, there are a lot of people working on behalf of our community, and you get a moment to see all of them before they turn off their videos. So now I'll turn it over to Madam City Clerk to advise the public on how they can comment on tonight's agenda.
Thank you, Mayor Kate. At this time, I would like to invite staff to turn their cameras off, and thank you so much. Before we begin, I would like to announce that tonight's City Council meeting will include Spanish language simultaneous interpretation provided by qualified interpreters on the Spanish Zoom channel. You can join the Spanish channel by clicking on the interpretation icon in the Zoom toolbar. It looks like a globe. And we've posted a link to the Zoom meeting in the live chat as well. As a reminder, we ask that anyone and everyone participating tonight speak slowly to allow our interpreter to effectively express your comments. And at this time, I would like to invite one of our interpreters, Charles, who could consecutively interpret that into Spanish for anyone who's currently watching on YouTube.
Buenas noches, solo queremos avisarle a todos los aquí en esta junta que esta reunión incluye pues, intérpretes del español que pueden interpretar simultáneamente por medio de Zoom. Pueden unirse al canal de español por medio de hacer clic en el icono de abajo de Zoom, donde hay un icono que parece un globo. También hay un vínculo que pueden hacer clic ahí en el chat. Y un recordatorio que todos deberían hablar despacio para que los intérpretes puedan interpretar precisamente.
Thank you. Also, this meeting is being streamed live to YouTube, where viewers can provide comments in the live chat, or they're welcome to attend by telephone by calling 669-900-9128. And the meeting ID is 899-2635-9885. If you're participating over the telephone and you wish to provide public comments, please press *9 when the mayor opens the public comment period. When it is your time to speak, you will hear a notification that the host is inviting you to speak, and you'll need to press *6 to unmute yourself. Once you hear the notification that you have been unmuted, you will have 2 minutes to speak. If you're submitting comments on YouTube to be read aloud into the record, please write public comment in caps. Introduce yourself and submit your comments. And note that there is a character limit on YouTube, so please submit your comments in groups. Additionally, if you're planning to speak to the City Council on matters not on this evening's agenda, please submit your comments now, as that will be coming up soon on the agenda. If you've submitted comments prior to the meeting by email or letter, they have been forwarded to the City Council and they've been published to our website. Closed captioning is available for this meeting, and I'll post the link in the YouTube live chat now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam City Clerk, to once again help us navigate this virtual world and conduct our community business. So thank you. There's nothing to report on closed session as we did not have one. So now we are to the part with an open time for public expression. This is for any item that is not on our agenda. Madam City Clerk, is there anyone that would like to provide some comments?
Thank you. Once again, just to go over quickly, if you're participating on Zoom, you can use the raised hand feature. And once you've been requested to unmute, you'll have 2 minutes to speak. Or if you're on the telephone, you'll press *9 to virtually let me know you'd like to speak. And then once I invite you to speak, you'll need to press *6. And then again, please go ahead and enter your comments into the YouTube live chat. As a reminder, we ask everyone participating tonight to please speak slowly to allow our interpreter to effectively express your comments. And we do have 2 speakers. Let me get my timer ready.
Yeah, thank you.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Hi, I apologize. I'm just kind of getting on board. I'm not sure if the rent control is on the agenda tonight. And if it is, then I'll wait to make comment when that topic comes up. I think that's what I'm supposed to do. Is that fair to say?
Yes, it is. During the regular public hearing, we will be discussing a temporary moratorium on certain rent increases. So I think that's the item to which you're referring. So
yes.
You just sit tight. Yeah, it'll just be in a few minutes. We'll get there.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Marina?
Hola, buenas noches.
Hola, go ahead.
Sí, disculpe, pero yo tengo entendido de que en esta noche sí se va a hablar acerca del control de rentas, pero mi otra pregunta es que en la comunidad ha habido mucho miedo y falta de información acerca de los efectos secundarios de la vacuna del COVID-19. So quisiera saber si en algún dado momento la ciudad puede mandar información en español para motivar a las personas a que se la pongan, por favor, ya que debemos cuidarnos todos.
Yes, sorry, but it's my understanding that tonight we will be talking about rent control. But my other question is, in the community, there's been a lot of fear and lack of information regarding the side effects of the COVID vaccine. So I was wondering if we would somehow be able to send out information in Spanish to the community to maybe motivate people to receive the vaccine.
Great. Thank you for the interpretation. And thank you, Marina, for that excellent idea. And I think you're part of the school board too. So that might be something the schools could actually help disseminate that information. So thank you. Is there anything else, anyone else, Madam City Clerk?
Oh, I was muted. Give me 1 second.
That's okay.
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, we do not. Looks like we have nothing on YouTube. We did have a public comment, but we had quite a bit of public comments that have been coming in related to the 3rd and Lindaro. We're publishing those to the website so they can be accessed there. And there's no public comments to be read aloud into the record at this time.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much.
We do have a raised hand.
Okay. Okay, go ahead.
Ariella, are you there? Okay, I'm gonna lower her hand.
Okay.
And let me just check one more place.
Yeah.
There is no more public comment. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the city manager's report. City Manager Schutz.
Thank you, Mayor Cade and City Council. I have a few updates and announcements tonight. First, I wanted to advertise a special meeting of the City Council, which is going to take place next Tuesday, January 26th, starting at 5 p.m. It'll be a meeting like this one, a virtual meeting, to select the vacant City Council seat, the person to represent the City Council seat for District 2. This is the seat that was made vacant when Mayor Cate was elected to mayor. And though we are now in a district election system, the council seats are at large until the first election, which for District 2 would be in November 2022. So anyone who is a San Rafael resident and voter can apply. So we've received 19 applications by the deadline, and 8 of those 19 reside in District 2. But again, it's not a requirement because it's an open seat until November 2022. Although if someone was appointed that was not a resident of District 2, they wouldn't be able to run for re-election in November 22. So we'll go through all of that again on the 26th, but just wanted to let the community know that the council is going to be going through that process. All of the applicants will have an opportunity to make a comment, and then the council that evening is going to be narrowing it down and doing some interview Q&A with top candidates deliberating and ultimately selecting the new council member for District 2. So that's going to be a very exciting night next Tuesday evening. A few notes on COVID. The conversation right now is related, a lot of it's related around ICU bed capacity and also vaccine distribution. For the ICU bed capacity, the best place to look is the state of California's COVID-19 website, which is a really long URL. So I'm going to ask the city clerk to put it into the chat. But it's basically the covid19.ca.gov, and then going to where they have a map of each county. And when I looked at it a few days ago, it was at 3.4% for Marin County. I'm sorry, for the Bay Area as ICU capacity. And I just looked at it earlier today and it showed 7.4% ICU capacity is the most recent update with today's date. So definitely moving in the right direction. We're not quite at that level of 15% ICU capacity, which is the magic number that the state has designated to achieving to put us back into the 4-tiered blueprint system that we were in before. And just how that works really quickly is that when the curve forecast of our ICU capacity looking 4 weeks out shows that we would have greater than a 15% ICU capacity, then we would be lifted out of that particular regional stay-at-home order, and we'd go back into the 4-tier system, which right now we'd be going back into the purple tier. So I just wanted to quickly touch on that because there's a little bit of hope, especially as we are seeing the ICU bed capacity improve. Still not nowhere near that 15% capacity, but we're moving in that direction. So the county is getting updates a couple times a week on that, and they're getting the information out as soon as possible. And again, when we're looking, telegraphing out 4 weeks and seeing it rise above the 15%, then we'll be able to enter back into that tier system again. As the council may recall, on all of the tiers allowed for outdoor dining, I know that's something that's a particular interest for the council and our community. So whenever I give even the slightest bit of positive information when it comes to COVID-19, I feel really compelled to add that even though it looks like the numbers are getting a little bit better, now is not the time to let our guards down. We are still seeing a very large number of new daily cases, and we need to keep doing what we're doing to create more ICU bed capacity and stop the spread of the virus. Just a couple notes on vaccines, because the county public health is really the lead on this, and they are only able to distribute what they receive. So really the supply is the issue right now, and the county health is doing a really good job of getting the vaccine out as quickly as they can. And they've put together a scalable model so that if they were to receive considerably more vaccine, they can get it out equally as fast by being able to scale up the system that they have. I'm not going to go into it because it's quite complicated, but there's a whole rundown of the order that the vaccines are happening in at the county's coronavirus website, which I think the city clerk has either put in or will put in the chat. The base website is coronavirus.marinhhs.org. And it goes through the different phases, as everyone's aware, starting with healthcare personnel, skilled nursing facilities, intermediate care facilities. So starting with phase 1A, which has been underway for a while, and the different tiers in that group. And then starting phase 1B, which we're now moving into at this point. And that's those at risk of exposure at work in education, childcare, food and agriculture workers, and emergency services, and then people over 65. So that's what you're hearing about in the news and through all of the information that the county and the city is sending out. And then, of course, there are future phases as well, phase 1C, phase 2, and phase 3. So all of that information is on that website. From the city assistance side, we have fire department employees who have helped with logistics and check-in for those that are getting vaccinated. We also have firefighter paramedics that have helped with actually giving the actual vaccinations themselves, providing them to others. And we've also communicated to the county that we have additional staff available should they need more City of San Rafael employees for vaccine distribution. I usually talk a little bit about the other state and federal assistance related to COVID, but I think in the interest of time, I know we have a lot of people at this meeting waiting for the upcoming items. So I'm going to leave all of the renter and landlord assistance and other sorts of assistance to that particular item, our Canal Policy Working Group agenda item coming up soon on the agenda. And lastly, I just wanted to do one other commercial for an upcoming Planning Commission meeting where the Planning Commission has been hearing about the Downtown Precise Plan. And they have reviewed most of the chapters, but we'll be looking at their next meeting, which is coming up on the 26th of January at the form-based code, which is like a zoning ordinance, kind of size of buildings, types of buildings we'd like to see in the downtown. That will be at the Planning Commission meeting of January 26th. And my last pitch on those meetings is I know that podcasts are very popular right now. So if you're listening to podcasts while you're walking or driving or riding a bike, you can listen to the Planning Commission meeting or even City Council meetings. So if you're interested in kind of what's going on in the planning for downtown San Rafael through the Precise Plan or the general plan, those are all recorded. You could watch them live or you could listen to them later at a time that's convenient for you. I'm saying that so we could try to get Planning Commission views up there with the Daily or This American Life or something like that. They're really quite interesting to listen to and you learn about your community at the same time. So I'll turn it back to you, Mayor Kate and City Council. Thanks very much for the opportunity to provide some updates.
Thank you, City Manager Schutz. And I echo your encouragement of everybody to keep up the good work with wearing masks and washing our hands and social distancing. It is not easy, and no one says that it is. And I think we can keep encouraging and reminding each other. And with the vaccinations on the horizon, we will get closer to having outdoor dining again and all those things that we really miss. So thank you for that reminder and update.
Sure.
So the next item is Councilmember Reports. And for those just tuning in 2021 to the San Rafael City Council, we've actually changed where this is in our meetings because the 4 of us and eventually the 5 of us are representing San Rafael all the time and not just this evening. So I will ask my colleagues if you have anything to report. I do know that many meetings were postponed at the very beginning of January. They often are. So if you have anything, you can wave or, yep, go ahead, Councilmember Bushy.
Hello, yes. One of my happiest tasks that I have is to represent San Rafael in our wastewater treatment collection and treatment agencies, both of which have met early this month. The first meeting was a big and exciting day at the San Rafael Sanitation Agency when our very own Mayor Kate became the head of our board. That was our major action at that meeting on January 7th. And then on January 13th, the Central Marin Sanitation Agency, our wastewater treatment agency, the big plant out by the freeway, met. And the big event there was a kickoff of our 5-year strategic plan. We will be starting that process next month. So we're all looking forward to thinking big thoughts about where we're taking the agencies. That's my report.
Thank you. See, now everyone who's been driving by can say, oh, that's what that plant is off of Highway 101. Councilmember Gulati or Councilmember Kurtz, do you have anything?
Sure.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. I think I just want to start by recognizing the staff in the city of San Rafael, because there is so much new information that we are constantly getting, and the way that they are giving it to us is so well organized and so digestible. So I really want to start recognizing everybody who's been so supportive. And I think there's been a lot of listening to the community in the month of January. For example, I participated on Friday with Canal Alliance and Voces del Canal leaders, and really want to recognize everybody and thank them for their stories. You know, some of the topics that they came up, rents and evictions, the different debts that is getting accumulated, the COVID-19 testing, and also the vaccines. What Marina was recognizing, I think there is a lot of myths that it would be great to just talk about the community and getting some experiences of people that they have received the vaccine, and seeing that actually is a really good thing for the entire community. And also interesting perspective about the different jobs. A lot of people losing their jobs as essential workers, and getting a different type of jobs, you know, that they need to do in order to survive. So it's interesting as well to see how that is evolving. And also I wanted to, we participated, Councilmember Kurtz and I, in the Marin Organizing Committee yesterday. So that was also good to see like the different coalitions of organizations that they are involved. And also the Federation of San Rafael Neighborhoods, that was very well represented. So really want to thank them as well, and put a voice out there to everybody who's listening from the canal that they would like to have representation. So if you live in the canal or any other area that is not represented, they are looking for you know, different representatives of their communities. So that's all for me. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Kurtz. Okay, so I will report out. I am on Marin Transit. We met 2 weeks ago, and basically it was talking about the ridership hit due to COVID. There's been up to 60-75% decrease in demand, and how we're going to be looking at how we respond to that going forward. Transit has been putting in safe distancing protocols for those of us that ride transit. You can see it. So those really big buses that have 37 people, normally there are 9 people that can be on it. So the Marin Transit Agency has been working with the community to address that. And finally, we had an update on the facilities, different facilities. Our buses, they're stored, they have to be maintained, fueled. And who knew, but they're at over a dozen sites. I didn't know that. I bet everyone else listening didn't know they're at a dozen sites throughout Marin County, but a great deal of coordination to have that fleet be nearby, but we don't have one place where it's all sitting. So that's my update from Marin Transit. Yep, Councilmember, should you have something you want to say? No, you also, okay. So those are them. And as you'll find out as the year goes on and we start appearing, I know that the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, of which Councilmember Kurtz is a member, will start meeting, and we'll have more report out of those appointments. So, okay, moving along, we have the consent calendar. Are there any items that my colleagues would like to hold from the consent calendar? Okay, not seeing any. I will open it to public comment. Madam City Clerk, there she is.
Thank you. To comment on Zoom, please use the raise hand feature. And if you're commenting by phone, please press *9. And if you're submitting comments into YouTube, just go ahead and start submitting those as soon as you can. I'm going to give them about 15 seconds, 20 seconds.
Okay.
And I just want to remind everyone who's participating too that the comments that would be being made on the consent calendar are for the 3 items on the consent calendar. and that as soon as the consent calendar has had action, we would move into the temporary moratorium on certain rent increases. So just in case you have your hand raised, that's coming up soon. Okay, there go all the hands that were raised, and you can go ahead and check YouTube. I've got somebody here. Go ahead, Lisa.
I'm sorry, I think I raised my hand prematurely. I will save my comments, sorry.
Thanks. I'm seeing no comments for the consent calendar.
Okay, thank you. So with that, I request a motion for the consent calendar.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent.
Okay, it's been moved. A second?
I'll second. I was muted.
We can all see you, but we couldn't hear you. Okay, that has been moved and seconded. Madam City Clerk, roll call, please.
Councilmember Bushy.
Aye.
Councilmember Kurtz.
Aye.
Councilmember Urenz-Galati.
Aye.
Mayor Kate.
Aye, that motion carries 4-0. And now we're to the public hearing. Thank you, everyone who is being patient as we get through the city business. So we'll open the public hearing on the temporary moratorium on certain rent increases. And I will turn it over to staff for a staff report.
And before we move over to staff, I am going to switch interpreters to allow our interpreter who's been interpreting this entire time to have a break. So just give me one moment. This might take about 30 seconds.
Great, thank you.
I'll let you know when. Yes?
It says I'm disabled from screen sharing. So if you could make that adjustment for me so I can share my screen, that would be great.
That I will absolutely do.
Thank you.
And we are ready.
Thank you, Madam City Clerk. Okay, Assistant City Manager Lilovich, the floor is yours.
Okay, am I able to share the screen now, Lindsay?
You should be, yes.
Okay. You
Yes.
see my screen?
Yes, we do.
Okay, good evening, Mayor Kate and council members. My name is Christina Lilovich. I'm the Assistant City Manager, and I'm here to present to you the temporary rent freeze urgency ordinance this evening. Before I get started with my presentation, I wanted to recognize and appreciate a couple of people briefly. Catherine Kufa, who in her day job is the Assistant Director of Library and Recreation, but has spent the last 6 months dedicated to working with us on the Canal Policy Working Group and has just done a lion's share of the work you're seeing tonight. So I really want to recognize and appreciate her, as well as Ethan Guy, who's our housing policy expert who's recently left us for the East Coast, but is here with us this evening in case there are specific housing policy questions tonight. And then I also wanted to recognize our Canal Policy Working Group that you'll hear more about this evening, and our community partners who we've been working very diligently over the last few months to try to develop these solutions, one of which you're hearing this evening. So, I could probably put this on, let's see.
On the slideshow, you can do that.
How do I do that?
So it's up in the middle, a little high, right in the middle, to the right of animation. Oh, no, wait, so go. I was trying to help my 87.
Oh, there we go.
There.
Okay.
There you go. Just like that, you got it. Makes it easier. Thank you.
Okay, so I wanted to start off with a little data to help frame the problem that we're trying to solve. So we have over 10,000 households that are currently at risk for eviction countywide, with over 8,000 children living in those households. We also have 62.4% of the Hispanics living in the Bay Area have limited confidence that they can pay their rent next month. And you'll see the citation is, this is data that we've gotten from the Policy Link. I don't know if it's an institute think tank, and they're working on updating this data, but these trends are continuing. The employment rate is down 40% among low-income workers in Marin. And the households in debt in California, the average debt predicted at the end of the year 2020 was approximately $7,000. So I want to talk a little bit locally about how the pandemic has affected us here in San Rafael, and particularly in the Canal neighborhood. The Latinx community makes up approximately 16% of the population in Marin, but accounts for 56% of the COVID cases. Our essential workers, the service industry has been most significantly hit by COVID. Our restaurant workers and grocery store workers who can't do their jobs remotely and have been out there since day one on the front lines, continuing to provide those services. We've really seen the most significant impact with those individuals in COVID rates. And what we're seeing is really significant debt accumulation as people either lose their jobs, have to quarantine, or have unfortunately contracted COVID themselves. So what we have is this vicious cycle that's created this disproportionate impact where we've got the residents that have the highest risk of housing instability also tend to be our essential workers who have the most difficulty quarantining for financial reasons. And so this cycle continues, and the debt accumulation is significant and growing. I wanted to speak briefly about the Canal Policy Working Group. You see the names of the individuals here, both Mayor Kate and Councilmember Lorenz Gelati serve on that, along with County and Legal Aid of Marin, the Canal Alliance, Community Action Marin, and Marin Community Foundation. And we've been working for months, really rolling up our sleeves on a weekly basis to try to bring together holistic solutions to these pressing problems that are facing not only our residents, but the property owners and landlords and our local businesses as well. So that's been the focus of this working group, is really to look holistically at these problems, the impacts both from the public health crisis, but also the subsequent economic crises that we're seeing. So that city, county, and community-based organization collaboration and I could talk for an hour about all the work we've done together from the beginning of the pandemic, from setting up testing sites, deploying disaster service workers that are both city and county workers. Some of our staff have worked at the Canal Alliance to try to help with either testing or outreach and education. So those efforts continue and are, will continue. The first action back in November that we took as a result of some of the work of this group was to adopt a bold resolution. This was adopted both by the city and the county that called for equity-driven solutions to protect those individuals and businesses most disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. So that happened back in November. Then in December of 2020, the CDBG grant, or the Community Development Block Grant funded, was allocated 75% toward rental assistance. The other 25% is toward businesses also most disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. Then on January 12th, just last week, the county passed an extension of the county-wide eviction moratorium that will go into effect on February 1st and expire on June 30th of this year. And then there's some pending legislation that's related to all of this, AB 15 and 16, where AB 15 is a proposed statewide moratorium, and AB 16 is some additional funding and a framework for dispersing rental assistance funds. So that's just a little background context setting for you. Wanted to go over some of the numbers, and this is in your staff report and packet as well, on how much funding has been allocated and is currently being distributed for rental assistance. So this top chart you'll see here, the bottom right-hand corner, $5.7 million in rental assistance through funding through the CDBG funding, MCF, and county funding. And these resources are being directly allocated to the property owners and landlords. Households served, you'll see there's more need than there is supply. So we're really lucky. You'll see that bottom bullet there that we just received word last week that the county is receiving an additional $7.7 million in rental assistance from the federal government, which is a really big deal. So you see these numbers down here. It says that the money's dispersed total countywide, 1,476 households received assistance, 596 in San Rafael. And then in the current round of funding, 383 and 218 are San Rafael, the statistics on the current round are kind of a static point in time. You'll see waiting to be processed is over 1,500 applications, and we don't yet know how many are in San Rafael. That's because real time today, yesterday, and tomorrow, our staff are working behind the scenes to work with our CBOs to get that money out the door for rental assistance. So when we give you another update, I can give you a more complete picture of where all those funds were distributed. So tonight, staff is recommending a temporary moratorium on rent increases, or we're calling it for short a rent freeze, that would be proposed to go into effect on February 1st through December 31st of 2021. And the goal of this ordinance is to provide temporary relief to those residing in the 2 census tracts most disproportionately impacted by COVID-19 and with the highest housing instability. This excludes due to Costa-Hawkins regulations, so the rent freeze would not apply to single-family homes, properties containing 1 or more units, accessory dwelling units, or units built on or after February 1st, 1995. And the specific census tracts that the ordinance would apply to are 112201. That census tract has a 15% positivity rate for COVID, which is significantly higher than the 3% positivity rate for countywide. And then census tract 112202, which is Southeast San Rafael and the Canal neighborhood, which has an 8% positivity rate. So the thinking behind applying the census tract and our findings around the applicability to these 2 census tracts related to the COVID-19 case rate. So these tracts have the highest number of cases and the highest percent positivity rates in Marin. So that's like top 10%. So the other way to say that is 90% of the census tracts in Marin have less COVID cases than these 2 census tracts. As far as housing instability goes, these tracts also have the highest rates of housing instability. And from a rent burden perspective, they're also in the bottom 10% on the statewide Healthy Places Index, which measures the percentage of low-income renters who pay more than 50% of their income on their housing. This is a map to show you where the rent freeze would apply, and 112201 is that small census tract that has the line connected to it, and then you'll see 112202. I think that's it on that map, but if you have more questions about that, I'm happy to answer them after we're done getting there. Other protections in place for San Rafael residents, just for the community to be aware and for the council to be aware, there is a statewide rent cap in place that's 5% plus CPI, which is 1.1%. So that's a 6.1% rent cap. And the rental assistance programs are available countywide and across San Rafael as well. Support for property owners. So like I said, the effort here that we've been undertaking is trying to develop holistic solutions and looking at how this impact of COVID-19 is affecting our entire economy, and how are we going to make sure that both the tenants and the property owners can recover from this and rebuild their resilience. So the rental assistance funding that I spoke to earlier does go directly to the property owners. I also mentioned that $7.7 million is coming from Marin County. One thing to note there is there will be more information forthcoming about how and when those funds are being distributed. We're working very closely with the team of folks who are working that hotline, some of our staff, some of the county staff, to really create the most expeditious, least bureaucratic process possible to try to get those funds out the door as quickly to those who need them. There's a property tax deferral and no late penalties for property owners. And there's also some bank programs, the mortgage deferral programs and forbearance options for federally funded backed mortgages. And that's in alignment with the CARES Act guidelines. There are Small Business Association and economic injury disaster loans available to property owners. I mentioned AB 16 earlier. Our city council sent a letter of support for that legislation, both to Senator McGuire and to Assemblymember Levine. I tried to get an update if that's been discussed yet, or what's that looking like from the League of California Cities, and I didn't get any information, but if I get anything real time, I'll let you know. We're optimistic. Oops. And then we've committed to the property owners and landlords that we've been meeting with and discussing these policy considerations and commitment to ongoing engagement and conversations with them as we continue to move forward. So some community outreach. Like I just mentioned, we've had some meetings with the property owners and landlords. We've been meeting with the Canal Policy Working Group on a very regular basis. We've had discussions with the Chamber of Commerce, and Catherine presented at the Economic Development Subcommittee last week. And we've also pushed this information out on social media, Nextdoor, the city's website, and the city manager's newsletter, Snapshot. And we also did send out some mailers from our community development department. So just a couple more slides on implementation. Legal Aid of Marin would provide legal support as the first point of contact for tenants if the council were to approve this ordinance and a tenant felt that they were that their rent was being raised illegally. The city manager will establish procedures for a fair return hearing process. So in the ordinance that's attached to your packet, there is a legal requirement that we allow a property owner to petition that an increase is needed in order to allow for a fair and reasonable rate of return to them. So we will be establishing that process, and that is part of delegating authority to the city manager, which is to establish those procedures as part of the ordinance. So next steps and then any questions. So the proposed rent freeze is really just one step in the path to overall recovery. This is not the end of the conversation by any means. We're going to continue to partner with the county to get those funds out the door. We're going to continue to evaluate a number of policies and programs to continue to support recovery. We'll need to analyze the outcome of AB 15 and 16. If AB 15 passes, there may be some legal implications to the countywide eviction moratorium that may need to go back to the County Board of Supervisors. However, the eviction moratorium itself is really being handled at a countywide level. So if those bills pass, hopefully those bills will pass, and then we'll be able to provide an update about how that impacts us moving forward. And then continued collaboration with our partners as we go. So that's the end of my prepared remarks, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you so much. Before I turn it over and ask my colleagues if they have any questions, could you just expand a little bit more on the action that the county took, just to make it very clear what is already taking place in the county in terms of the eviction moratorium? Could you just hit that a little bit more? Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So the county had an eviction moratorium that went through, I believe, March or April through September, and then state law AB 3088 came in and preempted a local ordinance. So AB 3088 is expiring as of the end of this month, and that's what AB 15 would do. Is it would extend the statewide moratorium. But because we're in this limbo where we don't know what's going to happen with that statewide law, the county moved forward with extending the eviction moratorium so that tenants cannot be evicted for non-payment of rent. So it essentially extends the same eviction moratorium terms that were in place prior to September are now extended from February 1st to the end of June.
And to clarify, that's for all of Marin County, including San Rafael.
Correct.
Okay, let's make it clear. Let me see if there are any questions. Vice Mayor Bushy, do you have any questions?
I do. Christine, could you take us back to the exclusions?
Sure. You want me to pull the slide up again?
There are two items on it I'd like some clarification on. Number one, the ordinance excludes buildings that were built after 1995, so the newer buildings are excluded. Is that right? So this only applies to older buildings. Is that right?
That's correct. So there's a Costa-Hawkins regulation. I just saw Nira turn on her camera. Thank you, Nira. I should have acknowledged you. Thank you for showing your face. Nira works with our city attorney's office and has done some remarkable work in legal analysis to support the staff's recommendation here. So Costa-Hawkins regulation does not allow, is very specifically does not allow any rent control measures at the local level to apply to those 4 categories. So Nira, do you want to add anything to that?
That's right. Yeah. So Costa-Hawkins prohibits local jurisdictions from enacting any rent control, which would include the proposed rent freeze that we have before you tonight on units that were issued a certificate of occupancy on or after February 1st, 1995. Costa-Hawkins also specifically prohibits local jurisdictions from enacting rent control on single-family homes and duplexes. And so that's why those categories are exempt from the provisions of this ordinance. And then the city also added a few additional categories that are typically excluded from allowable rent control ordinances, including short-term or temporary occupancy and transient occupancy in hotels and motels, and as Christine said, accessory dwelling units and government subsidized buildings.
Well, now we need to turn to our someone from community development. My sense is that most of the buildings in that area would fall within the coverage of this term. Because they're older than 25 years.
That's
that's correct.
That's correct.
Okay, so what do we have some sort of an estimate of these mandatory exclusions? The fraction of units in the census tracts that are covered, that are included, that are swept out by these exclusions?
Ethan?
Yep. So there's about 80% of San Rafael's rental housing stock is in those 2 census tracts. And that 80% of the rental housing stock would qualify and would not be excluded under this. Most of the ADUs that you see in the city, they're going to be in other census tracts and wouldn't apply, as well as single family homes, those sorts of kind of exclusions that Nira was talking about.
Back up, you lost me. 80% of our rental units are in those census tracts?
Yeah,
okay.
So if you think about,
and of those, what fraction are excluded by these mandatory exclusions?
Yeah, so the actual number is pretty marginal. I don't know the specific number of exclusions, but we're talking probably 10 to 50 properties.
Okay.
Yeah. The vast majority of the city's rental housing stock is in those 2 census tracts, and that rental stock is in housing that would qualify under, that would not be excluded. Yeah.
Okay, so the short answer to my question is these exclusions cover very few units. Great. All right. All right. Thank you. That was my question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilmember Lorenz-Gulati, do you have any questions of staff?
I don't. Just wanted to thank them because this is a lot of work and great data. So right now I don't have any questions. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. Councilmember Kurtz, do you have any questions of staff?
I do. The area on the table 3, the number of households receiving county assistance. So I'm you were talking about trying to make it as efficient as possible for those to receive any additional funding that's coming through. Is there an approach of taking the existing number of people who received funding in April and May and using that as a starting point? I'm trying to jive the numbers because there's what we believe there's 814 households or residents who've received funding. And is that the starting point to ask, or does a resident need to start the process each time that additional funding comes through? Is it starting from scratch?
No, it's not starting from scratch. So the team that's working on the rental distribution is at the county, and they had that original list. So part of that process, as soon as the new funding became available, is to try to reach out to those individuals, So there was kind of like a waiting list. There was individuals that weren't served by that first round of funding either. So that was definitely the starting point of that process. And now there's a hotline that's been set up, and where people are calling in, and they're I believe the county is in the process of staffing up that function, and we are talking with them about really how to redesign that to make it, really a high functioning process. So, but absolutely, it's that they have that data set of those individuals. So it's not a start over, but there is, even with the 7.7, I'm afraid that there's still going to be more demand than there is supply. So trying to figure out how to make sure there's an equitable distribution of funds for all those who are in need to the greatest extent possible is part of the challenge.
Right. So, but the onus still becomes on the resident to first contact the number. There isn't an ongoing supportive assistance from first application going forward. It's still on the onus of the resident.
I'm not sure I'm understanding your question when you say it's on the onus of the resident to reach out and say, I still need more rental assistance now that there's more funding available.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes,
but
they have to contact and okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, not seeing any further questions. I'll turn it over to the Madam City Clerk so she can coordinate our public comment.
Thank you. One moment. To comment on Zoom, please use the raise hand feature. If you're commenting by phone, please press *9. Once you hear a notification that the host is inviting you to speak, please press *6 to unmute yourself. As a reminder, we ask that everyone participating tonight speak slowly to allow our interpreter to effectively express your comments. And if you're participating on YouTube, please submit your comments now. And please note that when submitting comments, you will need to write public comment in front of your message so that we know that you would like it to be read into the record. And get my timer ready. We do have quite a few hands raised.
Thank you. So just a reminder, we look forward to hearing from everybody, and always new information is great, especially if there are a lot of speakers. We want to have the opportunity for everyone to speak. So please do pay attention to the time limit. Okay.
I should also say that I will be holding my phone up once you have about 10 seconds left as a reminder that you should probably wrap up your comments, and your 2 minutes will be up soon.
Okay, and I might even gently remind you if you keep going on, because again, we do want to hear from everybody this evening.
Rhea, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good evening. My name is Rhea Brown with Congregation Kol Shofar, which is a founding member of MOC, the Marin Organizing Committee. I'm a resident of the Canal neighborhood. Last night, nearly 200 leaders with MOC assembled on Zoom in support of the ordinance to implement a one-year moratorium on rent increases for the 2 census tracts in the Canal. For the past 10 months, we've heard stories from renters who have had little or no income and are sinking deeper into debt as the pandemic wears on. And yet we're also hearing that some landlords are still increasing the rent. A moratorium on rent increase is a good policy for several reasons. First, it helps our neighbors, many of whom are essential workers, stay housed. This is critical to protect public health and our economy. Second, it's simple to understand. Laws like AB 3088 are very confusing, even for the attorneys. When tenants are confused, they cannot stand up for their rights. A temporary ban on rent increases is clear and therefore easier to enforce. Third, it will help to stretch rental assistance being provided by government and philanthropy. We're thrilled that Marin will be receiving $7.7 million in rental assistance to help both tenants and landlords. A ban on rent increases will help stretch this money even further. This past year has been chaotic for everyone, but renters, essential workers, and immigrants have borne the brunt of the economic and health impacts. A moratorium on rent increases is a step in the right direction to provide some stability for families that rent in San Rafael. Finally, we want to emphasize that MOC supports the one-year time frame for this ordinance. Although we know that economic fallout from the pandemic will last for years, a year-long halt to rent increases will serve to provide some stability. We urge you to pass this for the residents of the canal and then consider working with us to pass a similar ban on other parts of San Rafael. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment.
Patty, are you there?
Yes, I'm sorry, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Good evening. Thank you for what you're doing. I'm Patty Brightman. I'm a member of Gan Halev and a volunteer at the St. Vincent de Paul Society in San Rafael, both members of the Marin Organizing Committee. I want to thank you for what you've done so far and encourage you to extend the moratorium on rent increases and the moratorium on evictions to the rest of San Rafael. It doesn't matter where you live. If your landlord is raising your rent and you can't pay your rent and you're falling deeper and deeper into debt, it's not good for your health, it's not good for the county, and it's not good for anybody. So thank you very much for extending this moratorium on rent increases and on evictions throughout the entire San Rafael area. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Patty.
We're ready for you, George.
Hi, Lindsay. This whole issue related to rent freeze is a symptom of a much larger issue, which is lack of affordable housing, not just in San Rafael, but in the county as a whole. We have failed for decades to deal with this very clear problem. And I call on you, a city actually that has done better than most in this county, to address this issue, that we need to get serious about rezoning, not only in San Rafael, but countywide, so that we start to address the issues related to unaffordable housing for basic support workers who we need to make our cities and our county work. Failure to do so will simply lead to future problems such as we face right now. It is critical that the city of San Rafael begin to lobby the county and other cities to take meaningful action to address the lack of affordable housing in the county of Marin. I hope you will all accept that challenge. If we do not, we are failing to serve the common good of all of our citizens in this county. Thank you very much.
Thank you, George. Maybe Madam City Clerk, you can remind people how they know when it's their turn to speak.
Yes, once I give you permission to unmute yourself, it'll ask you to unmute yourself. If you're calling by phone, you'll need to press *6 to unmute yourself. But if you're on Zoom, you should receive a notification that says the host is asking you to unmute. Go ahead and unmute and then feel free to begin your 2 minutes.
Great, thank you.
And we do have a caller, so you're gonna need to press *6 once you hear the notification.
Hi, my name is Ursula Lindsay. I am a staff attorney and investigations coordinator at Fair Housing Advocates of Northern California. We also submitted a support letter to the city clerk. Fair Housing Advocates of Northern California urges you tonight to adopt the temporary moratorium on rent increases for the canal census tracts. As Fair Housing Advocates, we know that people with low incomes are disproportionately people of color, and 52 of the households that contacted our organization about a COVID-related issue expressed difficulty paying rent, utilities, or their mortgage due to the loss of income related to COVID. Of the 52 tenants that were having difficulty paying their rent, 16 faced eviction and 7 wanted to or had already broken their leases because they were unable to afford the rent. In Marin County, Hispanic and Latino people are just over 16% of the population, but represent 67% of the COVID cases and 50% of the hospitalizations. For a household paying more than half of its income to rent, even before the pandemic, a rent raise of 5% would be devastating. For people living in the canal, many of whom are families who are also living with mental and physical disabilities. The prospect of a rent increase at this time is catastrophic. Please adopt this resolution tonight, stabilizing rent for people who have been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Hello, this is Len Rifkind calling in. I'm sorry you caught me in the car, so I'll try to just speak extemporaneously without reading anything. I'm opposed. Can you hear me, everybody?
Yep, we can hear you.
Very good. Very good. So this is from memory because I'm driving. I apologize. We're opposed to the proposed ordinance because the data that I read in the staff report does not appear accurate to me. One, there are not 10,000 residences in Marin County subject to imminent eviction. There are no evictions happening right now for rent purposes. There have been none since March of 2020. The county has done your job for you and extended the rent moratorium through June 30th. So there will be no rent moratorium, rent evictions for another half year. We fully expect the state is going to step in before the February 1 deadline and provide further amendment to AB 3088. Second, the rent survey that I see in the staff that says $2,400 and something for a one bedroom and $33,000 and change for a two bedroom. I don't know where that information is coming from, but I represent many property managers and landlords. Those numbers are obscenely high, are not accurate with the rents that I'm familiar with. And in fact, rents are going down, not up, over the last 2 years. Next, in terms of the ordinance itself, I don't think you should have a presumption that the rent that's, this is for the fair hearing if a landlord wants to oppose, not oppose, request a rent increase. And you get a hearing officer from the city. There shouldn't be a presumption that the rent at the time of the hearing is correct, because the rent may well be far below market because we've had rent cap now for over a year. And so that may well not be anywhere close to market rent. And then lastly, on expenses, I noticed in trying to determine net income, it does not have insurance for an expense, which is required every landlord that has a mortgage on their property, and only 99% of landlords have mortgages on their property.
Mr. Ripken, if I could ask you to, I'm sorry to wrap it up. I know you're driving, so you can't see the little timer she held up, but you're at time.
Thank you. Thank you for hearing me. Have a good evening, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Hola, buenas noches.
Hello, good evening.
Sí, mi nombre es Marina Palma y soy voluntaria de Voces de Canal.
My name is Marina Palma and I'm a voluntary for Voices of Canal.
Y le quiero dar mis sinceras gracias al grupo de Canal Policy Working Group.
I want to give my sincere thanks to the Canal Group.
Canal Policy Working Group.
Excuse me, Canal Policy Working Group.
Gracias. Pero tengo una pregunta. Primero, tengo entendido que cuando se llama a la línea, pasan 3 semanas, 4 semanas y no lo llaman. Ya dijo la señorita que primero Dios se están ocupando de eso. Lo otro es que me gustaría saber cómo deciden quién necesita los beneficios primero, y después me gustaría abogar, aparte de las muchísimas gracias, que si se puede crear una póliza permanente tocante a vivienda justa, especialmente para todas las personas que necesitamos seguir viviendo aquí en Marin. Muchas gracias.
Yes, so again, firstly, I just want to say my sincere thank you to the Canal Policy Working Group. Now, I have a question. When we call the line. It's 3 to 4 weeks before we ever hear anything back. However, the lady now has said that, they're hopefully going to be taking care of that. But also my next question is, how do you decide who actually gets the benefits first? I think that's something we need to touch on. And also, I would like to advocate also for a permanent policy for fair housing for all. And honestly, I think it's something that we all need here in Marin.
Thank you, Pablo, for the interpretation, and thank you, Marina, for your comments.
Thank you.
Jennifer?
Yes, thank you. Hi, thank you for taking my comments. I would like to second Mr. Pedlo, George Pedlo, and Mr. Rupi, if that's how you pronounce his last name. I've been a renter and a landlord for 27 years. I've been renting for 19. So I'm on both sides of this coin. I have personally removed 3 homes in the last several years from housing stock because of the fear of rent control getting in more deep-seated instead of council going after the solutions that Mr. Pedlo and Mr. Rupe cited. It's really a housing shortage. We need more housing, and this has been going on for decades. And we're so far behind that this is coming home to roost in so many ways because of COVID unexpectedly coming up is just one of the ways it's coming home to roost. And it's such a huge problem. I do believe what Mr. Pedlo said. We have a lot of stimulus money coming in, and I'd like to see the stimulus money going toward assistive payments rather than rent control, because what you're going to do if you don't see the big picture, and I want to support all these people that are hurting. That's not what I'm trying to squash. But I need my council to see the larger picture of how to put an end to this much more permanently than using these assistive measures and rent control measures, because it threatens both sides of the equation, and the housing providers and the people that are needing the housing. And believe me, being on both sides of it, I've seen it and I've experienced it. And I just beg of you really to just take a look at that when you make your decision tonight. Think long-term, and we have a way to give housing assistance to the people in the canal. I want them to have that. They need it, they deserve it. It's important. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Hello, my name is Sarah Trimble and I live in Tiburon. I am 10 years old, in 5th grade, and I go to Bel Air Elementary School. I am part of an organization called Children for Change. Children for Change works to encourage youth to help the planet. I'm here today to explain to you why you should have all of San Rafael have a rental freeze, not just 2 districts. Because I believe that no one deserves to be homeless or scared they're going to get evicted, especially during the pandemic. First, I want to appreciate that AB 3088 will be extended in Marin until the end of June 2021 and is voted on unanimously by the Board of Supervisors. In Marin, affordable housing means people are paying less than 30% of their total income to rent. Unfortunately, though, in Marin, 49% of all renters are paying more than 30% of their income, and 26% of all renters are paying more than 50% of their income. With the loss of income, more renters are getting evicted from their homes. If you have a rental freeze for all of San Rafael, not only will it lower the numbers of evictions in San Rafael, but if you allow all of San Rafael to have a rental freeze, the Board of Supervisors might decide to vote to do a rental freeze for all of Marin. If you decide to do a rental freeze for all of San Rafael, and if the Board of Supervisors decides to do a rental freeze for all of Marin, lots of evictions will be stopped. So I'm asking you to consider doing a rental freeze for your whole town, not just 2 districts. I have rented out an apartment before, and I know it is expensive, especially now that the coronavirus has struck. Renters' income has lowered a lot. Can you imagine people outside in the cold rain? I can't. I hope you can help this issue by considering to do a rental freeze for your whole town. Thank you for your time, for letting me speak to you.
Thank you, Sarah.
It's been about a half an hour. I'm going to go ahead and swap interpreters. Give me 1 moment.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And then we can continue.
Okay.
Okay, we'll move on to the next speaker.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Josh Sullivan, Supervising Attorney at Legal Aid of Marin, an MOC member, and a resident of San Rafael for more than 20 years. We thank the Council for considering the bold action of freezing unnecessary and inhumane rent increases for families who are already barely surviving. Since the pandemic hit, our employment and housing teams have participated in weekly in-person outreach at the Canal Alliance's food bank. This fall, nearly all of the residents seeking housing advice were either essential workers or had lost work. They were struggling mightily to make rent and desperate for additional support. We urge you to provide that support to San Rafael's low-income residents by implementing additional policies that promote stability and curb the spread of the virus, such as expanding the temporary freeze on rent increases for all of San Rafael and limiting evictions to only those cases where public health and safety are threatened.
Thank you. I don't think I hear you. Okay, thank you. I wasn't sure if you got cut off or you finished. Thank you. If you did get cut off, call back in and finish up.
Hi, good evening. My name is Marta Villela with San Rafael Catholic Church, and a member of the Marin Organizing Committee. Tonight, I want to support the temporary moratorium on rent increases in the Canal neighborhood. That is one of the most affected areas by the pandemic. I've heard some stories from some of the neighbors that are also part of my church, and it's really sad to know how challenging has been all this time that they haven't been through. So I hope that this will pass, and thank you for listening to our requests. Good night.
Thank you, Marta.
Hi, my name is Lisa Levitt, and I'm a pediatrician at Marin Community Clinics for the past 24 years. I work at the clinic at 3110 Kerner Boulevard, and many of my patients live in the canal, and they're able to walk to the clinic for their care. The COVID-19 crisis is pushing many of my patients deep into debt, and yet I'm still hearing stories from my patients who are receiving rent increases during this time. A moratorium on rent increases is a simple way to protect public health by allowing families to stay housed. I was very sobered by the statistic that 8,270 children are at risk, and many of them are my patients. Even an increase of a small amount, $50 a month, adds up and makes a difference to families whose work has been tremendously reduced. The financial stress is taking a toll on the mental health of my parents, which definitely trickles down to their children. So I encourage you to be an example, to think boldly and to act bravely and expand rent increase moratorium to all of San Rafael as well. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Lisa.
Is Bob there?
Good evening. My name is Bob Pendoli. I'm a member of the Environmental Housing Collaborative
and the Collaborative is a member of the Marin Organizing Committee. Both MEC and MOC support the temporary moratorium on rent increases in the Canal neighborhood. Please adopt it. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Bob.
Yeah, this is John Reynolds. I live a block from the Canal Community Alliance. I'm a very strong supporter of Omar Carrera and the Canal Working Group Task Force. They're pushing for what the voices of people in the canal need. Certainly coming online are rental assistance will help landlords, other things that will forbear foreclosures due to housing people, you know. Things are coming online from the state and the federal government. And that's great, but it's kind of complicated. What I hear from the voices of people that are affected in the canal, including myself, who is part of a condominium and a lot of people are renting there, is they need some assurance that the rents won't be increased even $50 a month, because they have a lot of children. They need to provide a lot of assistance to their children, food and school issues and things like that. And they don't have the jobs that could really support them. They have to bundle up in various housing together to support, to be able to pay the rents. And increases in $50 a month is very harmful to them. We need to do that. I'm a compatriot of these people in the canal, the people the Canal Community Alliance represents, the Canal Community Working Group represents. Also, I'm a member of the MOC. I speak from as a member of MOC as well as the Canal Working Group, that we need to listen to the voices of the people who live in the canal and support this rent increase freeze. And also, I talked to a guy who works at one of the restaurants today. He has an increase too. He's from Bret Harte. And we need to extend it. If it's, I know 80% is in the canal, but we need to extend it, at least Bret Harte, another census tract, this freeze on rents to help people that really need it. Thank you for your time.
Yep. Thank you for your comments.
Hello, can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Right. Thank you, Madam Mayor, Council, and staff. My name is Romeo Arrieta, representing the Marin Association of Realtors. I wanted to thank you for noting that there are several resources for property owners who may also be experiencing financial hardships. One of our ongoing concerns is that increasing regulations on landlords become a disincentive to provide rental housing. One of the speakers mentioned earlier that she has taken rental properties off of the market. And I think we can all agree that that is an unfavorable outcome. I wanted to thank Councilwoman Bushy for addressing several of the questions about exclusions with Costa-Hawkins that I would have had. Thank you for noting the single family duplexes and buildings built after 1985 exclusions. I also noticed that several of the statistics for the amount of people that were quoted in the staff report were county specifics. Just curious when staff and council reconvene after public comments, if there are perhaps any more localized statistics. I would like to offer our assistance, the assistance of the Marin Association of Realtors, to disseminate any information about rental assistance, both to tenants and property owners. And there's one last thing that I wanted to say. I wanted to say gracias a los intérpretes. Thank you so much to the interpreters. I know it's hard work, and thanks for helping everybody to participate in our city. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. My name is Linda Jackson, and I'm here tonight as a member of the Board of Sustainable San Rafael. And thank you for putting this on the agenda for consideration. Sustainable San Rafael supports the moratorium on rent increases in the Canal neighborhood that is before you tonight. The rationale for the moratorium that is spelled out also applies to renters throughout the city. The pandemic's impacts on low-income residents across San Rafael has created a citywide housing emergency. The growing tent communities in San Rafael speak to the fact that an increasing number of San Rafael residents are losing their homes. There are apartments across our city in every district where essential workers and low-income residents live. The numbers may be smaller, but their need is not smaller. The unintended impact of not including people living in apartments in Montecito, along Lincoln Avenue, on Nova Albion and Las Colinas, and in Gerstle Park is that thousands will be left unprotected if this is limited to just 2 parts of San Rafael. We urge you to adopt this temporary moratorium and to extend it citywide so that all apartment dwellers will be protected during this pandemic. Sustainable San Rafael believes that sustaining the diversity of our community is at stake and urge your support for renters throughout San Rafael. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda.
Alex, are you there?
Good evening, Mayor Kate and members of the City Council. My name is Alex Calfin and I'm with the California Apartment Association. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on this issue. First, I would like to thank staff for engaging with the stakeholders in what has been a very transparent process to this point. Having said that, my comments today are in opposition to the rent moratorium. While I recognize the pressing need to help those impacted by COVID-19, especially the citizens of the Canal neighborhood, I strongly disagree with the notion that the proposed rent control measure will help tenants who are unable to pay rent. Rather than adopting rent control policies, I urge the council to pursue additional rental assistance funding, which will directly help struggling tenants and landlords in the Canal. We know there will be more state and federal money available, and these funds can be used to provide much needed help for tenants who are unable to pay rent due to the pandemic. We also submitted a letter in regards to this ordinance outlining several concerns. Specifically, I would like to point your attention to Section 4 of the ordinance, which implies a decrease in services is considered an increase in rent. This section is concerning as property owners may be required to reduce services in order to comply with local, state, and federal health orders. Access to places like laundry rooms, gym facilities, and other common space areas may be reduced or even prohibited by a health order, and property owners should not be punished for complying. As such, we respectfully ask this section be amended. Additionally, we request the council consider amending this ordinance to require tenants to cooperate with property owners who are applying for rental assistance. This will help expedite the distribution of rental assistance funding should it become available. And I will wrap up by saying that up to this point, most of the assistance has been centered around helping tenants. And I just want to say that there are many struggling small landlords who are barely hanging on, and layers upon layers of ordinances and regulations make it very difficult for them to continue to provide safe and affordable rental housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex.
Hi, my name is Evelyn, and I agree with the moratorium, but also I would like to ask for it to be maybe permanently extended throughout the whole Marin County, because the homelessness that I have seen is increasing very much. And I have friends with babies right now on the streets asking for help because they can't pay rent, and landlords are increasing the rent. And I wonder why, if they have been paid rent many years. And also they're increasing rent on apartments that are not well maintained or are very old. So I would like for you guys to take that into consideration. And also, I totally agree with George, who made the comment about that it should be extended to the whole county. And I appreciate your time and letting us comment on this. I hope that you guys pass a permanent moratorium on rent.
Thank you, Evelyn.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor Kate and City Councilwoman. My name is Omar Carrera, CEO at Canal Alliance. We are a property owner in the Canal neighborhood and have been working since day one alongside city and county staff, developing and implementing strategies to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. I want to emphasize that the two census tracts under consideration have faced historical inequities prior to the pandemic. The vast majority of Canal essential workers play an important role in the hospitality and service industries. In precisely these industries, they have been disproportionately affected by the pandemic, which has caused many people to lose their jobs or have their working hours greatly reduced. Perhaps the best way to describe the Canal situation is that we have a crisis on top of a crisis. Ensuring the families are housed during this uncertain time is the best strategy to control the pandemic. This crisis requires a collective response in which landlords, tenants, CBOs, and local government work together to prevent evictions. Evictions are a bad business for everyone. We urge you to adopt the ordinance to freeze rents immediately. It is an important step towards the recovery phase. Thank you for listening and thank you for your support.
Thank you, Omar.
Are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you. Good evening. Good evening. My name is Betty Cray. I'm a member of the Marin Organizing Committee. I volunteer at St. Vincent de Paul Society, a member of MOC. I've been a resident of Terra Linda for 36 years. I know there are many legal, statistical, etc. issues to be addressed here. I'm asking you please tonight to comply with all of those issues and also please lead with your heart. Please adopt this ordinance and extend it to all of San Rafael. Thank you for listening to me tonight.
Thank you, Betty.
Buenas noches, ¿me escucha?
Yes, go ahead.
Sí, mi nombre es Aurelia Vargas, soy voluntaria de Voces de Canal, yo vivo aquí en el área de Canal. Yo quiero agradecer por aprobar el apoyo de congelamiento de rentas, ya que pues somos trabajadores esenciales. Yo enfermé de COVID y a consecuencia de eso perdí todo mi trabajo. Y quedan muchas consecuencias, muchas secuelas, y yo estoy muy agradecida porque lo aprueben y quisiera que lo extendieran, porque en realidad los aumentos de renta son muy altos y acumulamiento de cuentas también. Entonces yo estoy muy agradecida y la verdad yo pues no he vuelto a recuperar todo mi trabajo desde que padecí del COVID y pues espero pronto pueda empezar a recuperar, pero pues es muy difícil. Entonces yo sí agradezco todo el apoyo que nos están dando y espero que sea a muy largo plazo, que lo extiendan y pues muchas gracias por todo. Yo nada más quería agradecer la aprobación, ojalá y se cumpla y porque en realidad somos trabajadores esenciales. Aquí en Canal nos impactó mucho la pandemia y pues necesitamos mucho apoyo porque las rentas suben, no suben de $20. Hay amistades que conozco que le suben de $200 a $300 cada mes y es injusto porque el salario no es buen salario el que recibimos, especialmente si uno trabaja en restaurante. Yo trabajaba limpiando casas y prácticamente nada más me quedé con 3 casas. Perdí todo mi trabajo a consecuencia del COVID. Muchas gracias.
Gracias, Aurelia.
So my name is Aurelia Vargas. I'm a volunteer member of Voices of Canal. I live in Canal. I just wanted to thank you for the support regarding the rent freeze. We are essential workers. I got sick of COVID, and as a consequence, I lost most of my job. There were many consequences, and I just wanted to say that I appreciate the support we received, and I hope that you approve and extend it. The rent hikes were very high, and again, I appreciate all of the help. I have not been able to get all of my job back entirely because of the COVID situation, and I hope to get better myself, but it is a very difficult time, and we appreciate all the support that we have received. We hope that you extend it long term. Thank you very much, and we just wanted to say in advance that we appreciate the approval as long as it goes through. And in reality, we are essential workers. In Canal, the pandemic really impacted us. We need a lot of support here. And rent goes up, not by $20. Some of my friends say that their rent goes up $200, $300 a month, and we don't receive a very good salary. For instance, I clean houses, and I lost all of my jobs except for only 3 houses that I can clean, so it's very difficult. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Charles, for your interpretation.
We have a few more hands.
Okay.
Mayor and council members, I'm Stephanie Hafner, Executive Director of Legal Aid of Marin. We're members of Marin Organizing Committee and the Canal Policy Working Group. During the pandemic, new housing cases from San Rafael have increased by more than double over the same period last year in our office. And the share of immigrant households seeking housing help from our office has also spiked from just 30% of cases pre-pandemic to more than half of our new housing cases today. And the stress our clients are under is increasing, as you've heard. People who reach our office express fear and despair at facing mounting debt, sometimes leaving our own staff in tears from the stress of being unable to fully help. Rent increases only add to that stress. While we support the action before the City Council, freezing rents temporarily is an important measure to relieve the extreme economic strain families are under due to the pandemic economy and compliance with public health orders. Thank you to the city staff, Mayor Collin, and all the council members for your consideration and for your leadership.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Hello, my name is Kate, and I would like to speak in opposition of this ordinance. I would like to make a few points from some of the comments that have been made to, again, state that currently in California under AB 1482, that rents cannot be increased more than 5% plus CPI. So I'm not sure where these large increases are coming from, but those landlords should be held accountable for that. However, the majority of landlords that I work with are good people and are not evicting, as there is an eviction moratorium in place. And prior to COVID happening, the city already had in place other rental housing restrictions for mandatory mediation. And this is a much larger problem. And we need to be looking at long-term solutions. And I don't believe that this is going to solve those. And I would also like to see more inclusion of property owners in the conversations and working groups, because we need to work together as a community during this time and find solutions that can help to strengthen our community for years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate.
Hello, my name is Notori Gomez and I live in San Anselmo. I'm 9 and I attend Wade Thomas Elementary School. I am a member of a nonprofit organization called Children for Change. C4C is a group to help our community and our people. First of all, I want to tell you about something called rent freeze. Rent freeze is so landlords cannot increase rents during this time. By this time, I mean COVID-19. During COVID, a lot of tenants have lost their job and were not able to pay their rent. AB 3088 has helped a lot of tenants to keep their housing, but it's not enough. If the tenants get a job, the landlords can still increase the rent to try to get the money they lost. I would like to advocate that rents not be increased for an entire year of 2021 because it's going to take a while to recover from the financial damage caused by COVID-19. I would like to have the rent freeze added to AB 3088 to further protect tenants during the pandemic. Thank you all for your time and service, and thank you for giving me an opportunity to advocate for something that will make this community a better place for everyone. Also, young people like me and others are not just changing problems in the community, they're changing the future. Thank you.
Thank you for calling in.
Blanca, are you there? I'm going to move to the next person for now.
Okay, thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Judith Bloomberg. I'm a member of Congregation Road of Shalom in Santa Fe, which is an MOC institution. I support the temporary moratorium on rent increases in the Canal neighborhood. I've been a longtime resident, over 30 years in Santa Fe. As was said by Dr. Levitt of the Marin Community Clinics, even small rent increases affect people's physical and mental health, and especially for children. So I encourage the City Council to as well expand this moratorium on rent increases to the entire city of Santa Fe. We're talking public health here. Thank you for all you do.
Thank you, Judith.
Okay, Blanca, we're coming back to you. We're ready for you. Blanca, you've unmuted. Okay, we're going to go ahead and move to our written comments and we'll try Blanca again.
That would be great. Thank you, Madam City Clerk.
Okay. My name is Laura Giacomini, and I am a member of Kol Shafar, a member of MOC. I support the temporary moratorium on rent increases in the Canal neighborhood. My name is Gail Dorff. I'm a member of Kol Shafar, a member of MOC. I support the temporary moratorium on rent increases in the Canal neighborhood. My name is Hannah Bickoff, and I'm a resident of Center Fell. I support the temporary moratorium on rent increases in the Canal neighborhood. My name is Christina Garcia. I represent MOC in the Church of Center Fell. I live in Terra Linda. 2 months ago, my rent raised $50 and I lost 80% of my job due to the pandemic. My name is Christina and I support not raising the rent. Madam Mayor, members of the City Council, my name is Peter Mendoza, Marin Center of Independent Living. Our organization is a member of the MOC. We support the moratorium on rent increases for our valued community members. Doris Mazariegos. I support the moratorium in the Canal, but also all the cities in Marin. I live in Novato. We need to help too. What is the reason that landlords can increase rent during a global pandemic? Please listen to the 10-year-old that spoke tonight. I think about the children. Thank you, MOC, for all the support and members of the council for hearing us. Name withheld. I live in a fourplex condo. It was built in 1973 and we just got a letter from our landlord. He increased the rent $50. Is that right? Today at 5:45, we went to see an apartment for rent. It was 3 bedrooms and they were asking for $4,100. Angela Giacomini, did I read that again? I'm a member of Congregation Rodef Shalom. I'm a member of MOC. I support the temporary moratorium on rent increases in the Canal neighborhood. My name is Aiden O'Sullivan. I provide housing in Center Fell at 75 Canal Street. I manage and maintain the property myself for the past 15 years. I have provided a comfortable, safe, and affordable place for the tenants at that property. My studios rent for $12.40 a month. 1-bedroom townhouses rent for $16.95 a month. I am at least 15% below market rate. Most tenants at 75 Canal Street have been renting for 10 years. I have watched their families grow and parents get established socially and economically in this area. I now feel punished for my generosity and hard work, providing affordable housing and modernly increased rent. Added to this, I'm providing rent for tenants who cannot pay rent at the moment due to COVID-19. I'm not alone in this. There are other responsible housing providers that are not out to make a huge profit, just contain a hard-earned living. Also, please consider flood insurance has quadrupled, recycling, garage, water fees are high. Tenants are very respectful. However, there is a heavy usage in all aspects of the units, resulting in high maintenance costs. The objective is to maintain affordable housing for people. Please consider the providers of housing, especially the ones who are renting below market. Could a moderate rent raise exception be made for these housing providers? I'm gonna wait about 10 seconds. It looks like that concludes public comment for everyone who's called in, as well as everyone who's watching and tuning in through YouTube. But I just wanna confirm that and let the lag catch up for YouTube.
Yep. And could the caller call in? The last one, was she able to make it through? No.
Lowered her hand. So.
Okay. Okay.
That concludes public comment.
Okay, so I'm going to close public comment and really appreciate the fact that we had such great input this time and actually when we, I think we last met in December, so appreciate people sharing their stories. We're going to see if there are any additional questions and then we'll have a dialogue on the dais. So let's start with Vice Mayor. Actually, you know what, before we go to the colleagues, Assistant City Manager Alilovich, I heard some questions that came out and I saw you writing them down. I did too. So do you want to start with that? And if we miss any, then we will, between the four of us, we'll prompt you.
Mayor Kate, I'm sorry, may I ask for about 10 seconds to swap interpreters?
Yes.
Give me 1 moment.
Okay, so while she's doing that, if there are any other questions that you don't answer, Christine, we will be sure to bring them up because I think there were quite a few that came up.
Nice.
and we are ready.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so I had three main questions. So if I missed something, Mayor Kate, please let me know.
Okay.
And I'm going to defer to Ethan Guy on a couple of them. I'm going to start with the one that I can answer for you, which is there was a caller who asked about how is the rental assistance funding distributed? How do we decide? It is a county program because all that funding is being funneled through to the county. So I was getting some real-time update information from Lily Thomas from the county that first round of funding came through so fast that they did it on a first come, first served basis. But now that there's an additional round of funding coming, they are considering, for equity reasons, like some sort of a lottery system, knowing that there's going to be, again, more demand than they have to meet the need. So she said that's under consideration right now, and they haven't decided exactly what that methodology will look like, but I'm happy to follow up with her and her team to make sure we are part of that conversation and can provide more details on that as that unfolds. So the other two questions that I'm going to ask Ethan to speak to briefly there was a question about the fair rate of return and expenses and what's included in that. I heard that question, as well as a request to, so I'll start with that question for Ethan, and then on the request for amending section 4, I'll defer to Nira. So we'll go Ethan and then Nira, and then let me know if there are other questions that I didn't capture.
Okay, great. Ethan.
Yep. So in regards to the question regarding insurance, generally that's not best practice to include an operational expense. Operational expenses usually include salaries, deferred maintenance, those types of kind of higher level business analyses. The main reason why insurance isn't normally included in operational expenses is oftentimes that the levels are set by factors that are outside of the general business practice itself. So somebody might take a riskier mortgage, or they might require to have a higher level of insurance. So because of that, it's not normally included in the operation expense best practice. And because of that, it's not normally included within the fair rate of return analysis that's conducted when there is a defer, or when there is a challenge to whether or not there's going to be a fair rate of return. Whether or not you can include that is a separate question. And I defer to Nira if she has any kind of follow-up on that as well.
I'd agree with everything that Ethan just mentioned. There's no basis in the law that would require the city to exclude insurance as a basis for determining fair return. I agree that typically you don't see insurance included as operational costs for purposes of determining fair return, but if the city council's will is to include that, we can make that amendment.
Thank you. And I think there was an additional question, Nira, right? Is that the next one?
Could you speak to the request to amend section 4 to include the that additional language?
Yeah, so this was a question, I believe, Christine, correct me if I'm wrong, that you're referring to with respect to a decrease in housing services. Okay, so typically in most rent control ordinances, we have language that establishes that a decrease in housing services constitutes an increase in rent. And that's intended to ensure that landlords don't offset an inability to increase rents with a reduction in existing services. And existing services includes things like laundry facilities and walkways and elevators and typical services. There's a number of California courts have determined that temporary interruptions in housing services due to normal maintenance and repairs don't constitute a reduction in housing services. And so although the proposed language of the ordinance doesn't specifically articulate that, that principle applies here. and a reduction in services would only be prohibited under the ordinance if the reduction in services were greater than related to normal maintenance and repairs. So on the one hand, I think if the council wants to include the clarifying language that the apartment association has requested, that would be defensible. On the other hand, I think that there are already limitations on that language that are included in the language of the ordinance itself for the reasons that I just articulated.
And just a quick follow-up question for you, Nira. And when we discussed this earlier, you indicated that this type of provision is more typical in a permanent rent control regulation, and that I think from staff's perspective, it may not be as applicable given the very temporary nature of this ordinance and the very focused and targeted nature of the ordinance. So I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great point. So typically with the decrease in housing services provisions and rent control ordinances, there will be a petition process in which the tenants can petition to have their rent decreased. We ultimately decided that given the temporal nature of this ordinance and given the language that we are recommending, that kind of petition process was probably overly burdensome for this temporary time period.
If I may ask a follow-up question on, because we're on this subject, the overlay of COVID, because there are some services that have been closed down through state mandates or through county directive. For example, maybe there's an entertainment room or a gym or things like that. How is that handled? Is there an overlay? I mean, this is a unique situation where the reason we're even having tonight's agenda item is because of COVID. So I'm trying to figure out how does that manifest in this resolution?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Where the landlord is mandated to close certain services, not by the landlord's own neglect or failure to actively maintain, then that would not constitute a decrease in services. So those specifically related to COVID due to inability to social distance or safely operate services would not be a decrease in services that would constitute an increase in rent, and the landlord would not violate the proposed ordinance in those instances.
Would it be something for the council to consider to actually put in that clarifying language? Because when you read the resolution, I'm not reading it now because we're sitting here having the conversation, but I don't recall seeing that clarifying that you just gave verbally.
Yeah, I don't think that that's specifically that principle that I just articulated is a principle that would apply by law and not specifically in the definition of housing services. But if the council wanted to add that language with some limitations, we would do so. I would potentially recommend not including language that enabled, well, I would defer to you all on this, but I think it's possible that the proposed language would provide a means for a landlord to fail to maintain for a period of time, thereby falling out of compliance with state or local health standards and having to eliminate services due to a failure to comply with state and local health standards. So we might recommend sort of narrowing the apartment association's proposed language a little bit to contemplate more the circumstances that you were describing there.
Okay. Additional, I know we have more questions. Are there any follow-up though from the council on the ones that we've already touched on? Vice Mayor Bushy?
Just to put a suggestion out there, I'm looking at the definition of rent, and that's where the language is that the apartment association focused on. It says a decrease in housing services is considered an increase in rent. We could just insert the word a discretionary decrease or a voluntary decrease in housing services considered an increase in rent. I think that would capture the willful failure to maintain, yet exclude any non-discretionary or ordered reductions. For example, you must close your laundry rooms or gathering places. So I think that could very simply be handled with the addition of a word.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. There were, unless there are other related to that, and maybe you can be thinking about it, the other question that came up was about, was there data that was more specific to San Rafael rather than the county? And I'm not sure, that was a general comment, so I'm not sure exactly. We did both in the staff report. There was both San Rafael and county, but maybe.
Mayor Kate, was the question related to rental assistance funding or a general? So for example, the rental assistance funding.
It was rental assistance funding was what I wrote right after. So I think,
yeah. Unfortunately, the reason it's not in the staff report is, and down to the census tract level, is that the data wasn't being tracked that way initially. I think the efforts moving forward are to try to track that at a more granular level. But that's why it's absent. It's just that data hasn't been captured, but we'll be working on that going forward.
Okay, well, those are the questions. I have my own questions, but let's go ahead and go to the rest of the council, and I'll go last. So Councilmember Kurtz, do you have any additional questions?
The other question that I heard come up quite a bit was around expanding out to other areas. And I'm wondering if you could speak to the work that has already been done to consider expanding a rent freeze to other areas versus just doing it to the 2 census tracts.
Sure, I'll start with that, and then I might defer to Nira because she did a lot of the legal analysis on the findings associated with this policy. At a high level, we did a lot of analysis, looked citywide, looked at all the census tracts, and really tried to hone in and narrow to work towards solving the problem. When we come back to it, the problem that we're solving is addressing the needs to those most disproportionately impacted by COVID-19, and essentially drawing that line at the 90th percentile or 10%, whichever way you want to articulate it, but those that have the highest housing instability and the highest rates of COVID, at that line is where we found that it made the most sense and had the most legal basis to do so. There is equal protection concerns, and I'll let Nira speak to that and her legal analysis that supports the staff recommendation.
Yeah, thank you. So cities have pretty wide latitude to establish geographic limitations in rent control. And the standard that the U.S. Supreme Court has actually articulated is a rational basis standard, which means that if the city imposes a geographic limitation on rent control, as the proposed ordinance does, then those limitations need to serve a legitimate purpose, and they can't burden a suspect class or a fundamental interest. So what that means is, as long as our geographic scope furthers a policy of the city and does not ultimately hurt or harm a suspect class or fundamental interest, then our ordinance is defensible. And what we worked on and what this policies that staff put together over the last few weeks ultimately determined that there were 2 census tracts that were most at risk for overcrowding, likelihood of higher COVID rates, and economic and financial instability. And applying the rent control provisions to those 2 census tracts, but not to others who are experiencing those risks at a lesser rate, is indeed defensible, because the city has found that weighing the benefits to those 2 communities at the risk of certain landlords not being able to have their rent increase was a policy that the city wanted to further.
Thank you.
Additional, oh, where'd she go? Sorry, anytime it goes off, I was like, all of a sudden, it moved around. Additional questions, Councilmember Kurtz.
I have comments and questions, but I'm not sure if this is the right space or if we'll be circling back again.
We'll be circling back again. Let's continue to do the questions and then we'll get to some comments. So absolutely, okay. Yeah. Any additional questions? Councilmember Yorenz Gulati, do you have additional questions?
No, everything, all the questions I had, they have been answered. Thank you.
Thank you. Yep, Vice Mayor Bushy, yep.
Could you give me some analysis or what was your rationale for the duration of this proposed rental increase freeze? I noticed that the county is ending the moratorium at the end of June. Why is your proposal to go 6 months beyond that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a couple of factors at play. One is what's going to happen with AB 15. So if that does pass the statewide eviction moratorium, will extend through the end of 2021. The other piece more relevant to your question is why that time period is that the intent of the urgency ordinance is to really allow kind of a hold harmless space for the tenants to recover from their debt accumulation. So we're seeing funding coming in through rental assistance, but when I say hold harmless, not having any additional debt accumulation during this period of time will allow folks to recover as they're able to return to work, recover from COVID, et cetera. So the time period, so when you think about what it would take somebody to recover, for example, from $7,000 of accumulated debt, to, like I said, get the rental assistance funds, other programs, loans or grants associated. So that recovery cycle, we expect that full, well, it's almost a year, 11 months is the appropriate time span to allow people that opportunity to recover and not to add additional debt.
I'm sorry, I don't understand the arithmetic there. Because we're just talking about a freeze on rental increases. For ease of arithmetic, let's say it's a 10% increase on a $2,000 rent. That's $2,400 over the course of a year. So how does that solve a $7,000 problem?
So what I'm saying is that if there's additional rent, I wasn't totally following your arithmetic, but if the $2,400 they're paying a month and they have a 10% increase and now they have to pay additional $240, that's just going to add more to the debt that they've accumulated. It's going to take them longer to get out of it. So we're trying to allow a period of time for recovery without additional debt for folks.
But they will have additional debt because they can't.
But it will be lessened. So
right. So it's just a degree of magnitude. It's just an order of. It's not even an order of magnitude. It's just a degree. It's just to make. It's just to keep the amount smaller.
Correct.
And there's no reason to believe that a year is the magic amount of time to recover that. It's just a time period. All right, yes, thank you.
We would have to revisit. I mean, one of the things that we don't know is where we will be with COVID. I mean, I think we have a lot of optimism about the vaccine rolling out and folks being able to get back to work and that recovery cycle, but it's unforeseen. So of course we would have to return with more analysis on where we are at that time in the fall.
And well, could we do that in June? So I'm just concerned about us not being in alignment with our partners at the county.
Absolutely. So let me clarify what I meant by that. When we do the analysis on whether AB 15 and 16 passes, we will most definitely come back to the City Council with an update about how does that impact us, both at the countywide level and at a local City of San Rafael level. So we will do that. for sure. And I'm hopeful that we'll get that information sooner than June. So, so we should be coming back with an update in spring. The fall update would be more related to how are we looking as the forecasting of the expiration of the rent freeze if the council were to approve it tonight.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Christine, to clarify that the eviction moratorium that the county approved recently, tenants still are required to pay 25% of their rent as well, right? And so that's where the rental assistance is coming in, just to clarify. I mean, and this is a really complex, there's a lot of aspects to this conversation, but I correct in my correct in saying that. Okay. So the question, one of the questions that I heard that came up was both confusion for tenants as well as confusion for landlords, just about, okay, if San Rafael goes and does something that's different than the rest of the county. And that's why having the countywide moratorium made sense for everyone, because we were all on the same page. And so San Rafael is considering this because of the high incidence of COVID, the highest in Marin County, as well as overcrowding. My question to you is, are there resources there for tenants or landlords? Because actually some of the payments are actually going direct to landlords. They're not going to the tenants. Yeah, so to be clear that the rental assistant doesn't go to the individual, it goes to the landlord, where people can get clarification on that. Because I think what I heard is from some of the public comment, there's a little bit of confusion about what county government does and what city government does. Yeah. So maybe you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, it's a really good point, and it speaks to the outreach and education and continuing to work with our partners on making sure that that as these funds come in, that it's well understood how to apply for them, the path is easy, that sort of thing. Could you reiterate your first question, Mayor Kate?
Well, it was more confirming around the 25% payment on the big moratorium. So the first part was on the moratorium, and the second was, wow, you know, if it's confusing for all of us who have been talking about it, how do we ensure that tenants know what their rights and information are, as well as the landlords knowing that they also have rights and they're receiving payments through this program, or they will be through the rental assistance. So I guess,
yeah. So there's a couple thoughts. I mean, technical assistance is something that our partners are committed to doing, and they've been doing an incredible job at. When it comes to this particular ordinance, the Legal Aid of Marin has stepped up to be that first point of contact for folks who, if they're not clear whether the rent freeze applies to them or not, we're working on providing them a tool so they can do a lookup by census tract to try to ease any of that confusion on where would this apply, et cetera. We can continue we have a website dedicated to supporting those most disproportionately impacted by COVID-19 on the City of San Rafael website. And we are continuing to build out that content and information and push it out through all of our channels. So we'll take that as a suggestion to really enhance that content as these rental assistance details get fleshed out, so that we can try to have it as streamlined and easy to understand, both for tenants and for the property owners and landlords. And I do want to make a clarification. The countywide eviction doesn't require a 25% requirement, only the state moratorium does.
Okay. No, thank you for that clarification. So on the last part you were just talking about, we also got feedback that, and I don't totally understand this, so maybe Nero will understand this, or Ethan will, that there was a concern by some property owners that they need some sort of documentation in order to get rental assistance. So it kind of goes back to the question I was just asking about, how do we make it as frictionless, as seamless as possible for property owners to receive the rental assistance? Is there either in our resolution, or is there a requirement that tenants fill out paperwork? Yeah,
I understand the nature of your question, Mayor. And I hope this isn't an unsatisfying answer. My intent is to reassure that we're working with the county on this process. The reality is we don't have, and that money just was announced last week, so we don't have all the details exactly of what that's going to look like. But what I can tell you is the conversations that we've had have been focused on reducing the bureaucracy, making it easier and more streamlined, reducing the amount of paperwork and like eligibility requirements, because that's the stuff that really gets in the way of the process and getting the funds out as quickly as possible. So I know that there's a commitment from the county to really work on that. And one of the things we can't control for is what the federal government or the state government will require as it relates to what they will ask for in documentation. But there's a commitment from us locally to try to really make that easier for everybody and to not require a whole bunch of documentation and proof of eligibility. We know people are really hurting and they need the money. So, so hopefully that will help. I'm going to defer to Nira. I think that on this particular piece, I think there was a suggestion perhaps to add something about having, is this what you were asking about, Mayor Kate, about tenants cooperating with landlords or property owners who might need information from them in order to seek rental assistance? And, you know, staff's recommendation about that is that is something that we would be working with our community partners on, that we would be adding to the outreach and education material that I was just talking about, encouraging all tenants to make sure that they are cooperative if there are requirements that need to be met. I think there's a self-interest there where tenants are gonna, if there's funding available to help support pay their rent, that the hope would be that they would be incentivized to cooperate there. But I think there's a lot of mechanisms that we can use to help encourage that behavior, but adding it to this particular ordinance doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. I'll let Nira speak to that, but we've talked about this a little bit, that that we can't really regulate an individual's behavior. We can encourage it. And so I'll just turn it over to Nira to briefly respond to that piece.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that the language that was proposed by the apartment association would add a provision to the ordinance that mandates certain contractual obligations as between a landlord and a tenant, and the city doesn't get involved in, doesn't have the authority to get involved in those contractual relationships.
Okay. Well, as long as we're confident that the way the resolution is written, it is spelled out that the county, what's interesting about this is that the rental assistance and so much of the support, I mean, we're looking at the rent freeze, but really comes from the county, and thankfully they've been incredible partners in these conversations, but having clarity around that. So I just, if you're confident that it's very clear that we're not taking on something that we actually can't implement, then I'm confident. Okay. So those were the questions that I had. So let's just quickly looking. Okay, let's go around for comments, and we'll start with you, Vice Mayor Bushy.
There we go. So we're at comments.
Yes, please.
Okay. I'm going to start with a couple of propositions that I find to be beyond dispute. And I'm going to begin with Omar Carrera. Omar led our General Plan 2040 steering committee. And so I know that he is very well versed in all of the many facets of the housing shortage, and as well as many other issues in our community. And we should all be very grateful to him for his leadership in that effort, in addition to his role in the community. When he comes before us and tells us that this is an urgent matter and important and we need to act, that in my estimation is a compelling demonstration of the need for action. I begin with that point. Action is required. I also agree with and think it's that we all agree on the proposition that rental assistance is the better solution here. It satisfies it protects the tenant, it protects the landlord, it provides stability. The additional funds coming in are fantastic. We need to find every nickel and dime from any lawful source that we can possibly find to augment those funds and get them to tenants and landlords as efficiently and as equitably as possible. So we have these two things that I think are beyond dispute. In the middle, though, is the proposal before us. The proposal before us is asking landlords to absorb increasing costs that they will be experiencing. It is not lost on me that the next agenda item before us will raise costs, the refuse rates, which are a significant expense for multifamily housing. Our next agenda item is going to ask us to raise those costs for landlords. And this agenda item will require that they absorb that. They may be in a position to do that, or they may not be. I think the possibility of bringing forward a petition to have their rates reviewed, given the timeline here, is not a realistic way for them to protect their income. The timeline just doesn't work. It'll cost them more, take more time for them to try and get permission to increase rates. So we're in the middle, understanding that we are putting our hands on the balance and imposing costs on landlords. As I look at that and understanding the balance of what we're trying to do here, it seems to me that we need to carefully tread into this area, achieve the goal that we want to achieve for the narrow group of people that have been carefully identified. That means that we need to narrowly tailor our proposal to address just the problem before us. The problem before us that we're seeing is driven by a public health crisis due to a global pandemic, disproportionately impacting a particular group of a particular area of our community. Our actions then should be directed specifically at that group and focused on impacts driven by the public health crisis. It seems to me that we need a very solid rationale for our proposal to be out of step with the Health and Human Services agency in this area, the county. And I don't see that. There's no finding in our resolution as to why this particular term, the end of the year, is more rational than 2 years or 6 months, 3 months, 11 months. There's no rationale that leads to that timeline, particularly because it deviates from the Health and Human Services agency for the area, looking at the same public health emergency and being led to a different conclusion, that is the end of June. It may well be that the state legislature will extend the eviction moratorium to the end of the year through the legislative process. Then that would give us a great a great rationale to peg the term of our rent freeze as well, so that we are in alignment with our partner agencies and the legislature, rather than finding a timeline of our own without any supporting rationale, understanding that we are trying to narrowly tailor this particular proposal to achieve the goals we want to achieve, but understanding that we also want to limit the unintended impacts of this proposal as well. Because, you know, we've had testimony tonight about what those impacts can be. The last thing we want to do is sow the seeds so that in the incoming years, we see more and more rental properties being taken off the market or not coming to the market because of our overreach in this instance. So this leads me to support the concept, to support the proposal to freeze rents in this particular area, and to with the one change about the adding the one word to the definition of rent, so that mandatory changes in service levels do not constitute a rental increase. With those changes, and then limit the term to align with the county, with the provision and in fact, possibly the expectation that staff will be back with an extension request if the legislature similarly extends the eviction moratorium. So that's those are my thoughts.
Okay. Thank you, Vice Mayor Bushy. Councilmember Yorenz Gulati.
Yeah, really appreciate the comments from Councilmember Bushy, and look at everything that is out there. You know, all the perspectives. I think is really nice to have that in the council. You know, looking at everything that is available. I was thinking about what Omar Carrera said about this is the crisis on top of a crisis, and it is definitely a pandemic. It is a health crisis. Where there are other helps coming from the federal government, from the state, from the county as well. I see these as our families right now are really struggling, and these are like the essential workers that we need them to be ready to start working the moment that we open the economy. So I have heard from families that their debt is really rising, and I also understand the landlords, and I have heard from some of them, most of them saying that they haven't increased the rent at all because they want to work with their tenants. I feel that this is a policy that is very temporary, that is also specific to census tracts, and I feel that this is not the time to be raising rents right now. I think this is the time to really be working landlords and tenants to make sure that everybody remains housed. I know a personal case where the stress level, the stress level is so high with this pandemic, with the debt that is accumulating, where I know a case that he committed suicide. So this is like, you know, probably one of the worst things that we can experience. And when I think about the rent increase, I really believe that this is not the time to raise the rent. I'm not talking about doing this forever or everywhere, but very specific places where I think it's time to really support our community. And we are not talking about tenants not paying the rent. They still have to pay the rent, whether they are freezing the rent payments, you know, until they can, but they will still have to pay that rent. There is help from the county, and I'm really grateful for the moratorium to extend the eviction until the end of June. But I really feel that raising the rents right now is not the right thing to do. And I would love to see in these specific places, our census tracts, that they've been so affected, that at least they don't have to see that, you know, from all these. I mean, I think Christine was mentioning the average family, they owe $7,000. So at least is going to continue growing if they cannot afford the rent until they get a job, but at least that they are not getting like an increase on top of that. So yeah, those are my comments.
Thank you. And do you have any input on the timing of 6 months versus a year? The staff report had recommended a year, but in the discussion, both from the public and Vice Mayor Bushy, considering a shorter to align with the county. Do you give feedback on that?
I mean, the rents are increased yearly, right? So that's when you usually, like when you renew the contract is when you're increasing the rent? Is that the case? In most cases?
Well, I think what we're considering is that the rent freeze is for 6 months or a year, and the rent, it depends on the timing. Each rental contract is different depending on who it is. So it's not on the same calendar year depending on when they started it. So this would only be in effect during whatever is decided here tonight.
But I'm assuming that the calendar year, that the contract renews, although it's in different types of, some contracts maybe are due in January, some of them in March, but they are usually like 1 year contract. Are those usually the type of contracts that you have when you rent, right?
I believe they start out for a 1 year term and then they turn into month to month.
Month to month. It depends. I mean, I think they're
right. It's going to depend.
Lots of different flavors.
Yeah. So honestly, I do support the staff recommendation of 1 year because this is not going to be an easy recover. And I think a year will at least give enough time to trying to get a job and start paying all the debt back. So it's not completely overwhelming. And I feel for some families, again, the rent increase doesn't seem like a lot. For some families, it is a lot. So any help that we can give them right now, I think they desperately need it. So I support this recommendation from the staff.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Councilmember Kurtz.
Mayor Kate, if I may have a moment and swap our interpreters. One moment.
And just for those watching, once we conclude this agenda item, as long as it takes, or we're not going to rush it, we will have a 5-minute break. So before we go to the next item. So I apologize for everyone who's waiting to hear the second agenda item, but in the time of Zoom, I think it makes sense for everyone to just get a short break. So just so the interpreters can know that as well, Lindsay.
Okay, we are ready. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Madam City Clerk. Okay, sorry about that, Councilmember Kurtz. Go ahead.
No problem. Thank you. I just also want to thank again the staff for doing this work. There's been so much work and analysis and outreach to the community in terms of understanding what we're doing. And also to the Canal Policy Working Group and to the community partners. I want to also thank, I've received over 250 letters and phone calls in support of the rent freeze, as probably my fellow council members have also received many letters in support of the rent freeze request. I also want to comment on Councilmember Bushy's comment about having Omar, and I'll use Omar as representative of many, but Omar is the speaker many times at the City Council, and also reaching out to many members. And actually Omar reached out to the school district early on during the pandemic. And it is so hard to believe that we've been here almost a year in dealing with the pandemic. And so when we talk about a rent freeze for a year, it just seems reasonable and very, very expected that it would be for a year term, that we would be talking about this for a year as our community has been in a very difficult situation for a year. And that's everybody, most importantly, those who are living in the canal and affected in these 2 census tracts. So I remember I have a couple of items that are really, I want to not consider specifically for tonight's item, but also consider as addendums that we need to look at and related to this. And some of it goes back to the Canal Policy Working Group. The first letter we received actually from Canal Alliance, Legal Aid of Marin, and Community Action Marin was back in August. And many of us received earlier message prior to August, but I think the most formal one was in August. And then it was September that we got a list of over 20 items. And I'm able to say we because I received it, and Councilmember Glady also received it as a school board trustee. We received these letters of over 20 items. And that was before a policy group was created. And then we got more letters over periods of time, and now we're down to 2 items. So this 20 plus items have now been boiled down to 2 critical items, which is the one that the county addressed, which was the eviction moratorium. And when I listened to them speak, it was very clear that they are more than likely going to be extending that for the full year. And I know they are waiting to hear what's happening at the state level, but they have the opportunity to wait for what's happening at the state level. When we talk about the rent freeze, we don't have an opportunity to talk about that. So I don't know why we're hanging on our hat around rent freeze to the county, but I could definitely understand the question to bring that up. So I would like to, my question is, and the follow-on item is, we got to make sure, and I'm hoping the Canal Policy Working Group goes back to that original letter. And as Councilmember Bushy said, when Omar speaks, we have to listen. Well, Omar spoke early. He spoke early. And as Councilmember Micah said, this is, and as Omar has said, it's a crisis on top of a crisis. We have heard these issues for years and years and years, and they have now bubbled to the surface for people because of the pandemic. Is that a silver lining? I don't know. But I'm hoping, and so my request is, I really would like us to go back to those original letters and understand and see a work plan addressed with the county, with our partners, with other people involved at the table, because those issues, again, and right now, like I said, we're focusing on 2 items and there's still 20 plus items. My second item as a future item is expanding the rent freeze. Again, not for tonight. We don't have an objective way to do that today, but I think we have enough really, really smart people to think about how to do this and to think about, are there other methodologies that we can use to objectively identify other areas aside from census tract? Because we have people moving out of the canal who are moving into other parts of San Rafael, doubling and tripling up again. And we're seeing some of the same problems in other areas. So I want to make sure that we're not just propagating another problem, and we'll be right back here talking about that. And the third item is, many of us, fortunately, are seeing sort of the light at the end of the tunnel with the vaccine, which is fantastic. But now we're going to be in a period of recovery probably for a long time. And I don't know, I want to make sure that we have support for our community partners who are on the front line supporting our communities as we go through that recovery effort. So again, they're not to be addressed tonight, and they'll be addressed down the road, but I don't want to lose them because I think they're really critical, and we have to start looking at it now. Is how are we going? What are the programs that are going to be in place for recovery? It's great that the vaccine's happening. It's going to take a while for all of us to be vaccinated in our whole community. So that's another piece of it. So anyway, I look forward. I thanks for all the work by the city, also support from the county, the work that's happening. I hope our neighboring municipalities also consider similar actions, because it's not just a San Rafael issue and problem. It definitely is a problem that's affecting many areas of Marin. And so I'm happy to support both the rent freeze and with the 1 year, for the 1 year.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
So my comments also are gratitude for everyone that called in, for both Amar Carrera, but everyone who took the time to either write a letter or to send us a text or an email or to call. And I want to start with my comments with looking at the housing issue is broad. We are not trying to solve the lack of affordable housing with this initiative tonight and what's on the agenda. If it were only that easy, and that is part of a broader, bigger conversation that San Rafael, I'm proud of the work we have done here. We have shown up. We just recently approved 3301 Kerner. We help support Homeward Bound. We continue to show up when it comes to affordable housing. So when it comes to housing, San Rafael has continued and always shows up and supports that. In terms of the countywide and the lack of additional housing there, again, a broader conversation. And I encourage all the people that called in tonight. I appreciate the ones that live in San Rafael to give their comments and the ones that live outside of San Rafael to also work with their councils and to work with their communities to accept housing in their communities. You can take 2 seconds to Google Marin and housing, trying to stop housing, and there are lots of articles that come up. And I don't ever want San Rafael to be coming up in those types of articles because I want us to be in conversation with our community so we can continue to have a diverse type of housing here so we can have a diverse community. Regarding this is a long conversation. Vice Mayor Bushy and I have been blessed to be a part of it for many years. And back in 2017, the renter protections that San Rafael passed were, I think it was 2017 or 2018, were very robust conversations and much more comprehensive than the emergency ordinance that we're looking at right now. We are doing this, make no mistake, we are having this conversation because of the emergency of COVID. The renter protections that we did, we worked for that on months because when you start to put, I think Vice Mayor Bushy said it really nice, you put your hand on the balance somewhere and something else is changed. And for us to recognize that and to have all the stakeholders in the room, not just the ones that are most organized and not just the ones that send us the emails. There are other people who have effects of any decisions that we make here. So the renter protection policies, those conversations, and you can go and look at the meetings online, very robust, long meetings, because these are complex, challenging issues with unintended consequences when not thought carefully through. In terms of the challenges to housing, that came up in some of the input, and I want to recognize it. Again, proud of the fact that San Rafael right now, we're looking at, are there unintended barriers that we have to housing being built in San Rafael? We don't build housing ourselves, we approve it, which we do all the time. That's a process that started before this current council, started back in 2019 and is continuing. Again, what is the problem we're trying to solve? And again, to reiterate what Vice Mayor Bushy said, we're trying to address the problem before us, which has been brought forward, just as Councilmember Kurt said, by COVID. This is why we're having this discussion right now, why we're looking at emergency ordinances. We don't take this lightly to do stuff in emergency ordinance. It means that it's sped up. And even though government bureaucracy time does not seem fast, and it is not fast, this is fast in terms of government time. Creating policy takes time. Creating good policy takes time. And I would always want to take that time and have a policy that represents our values and does what we want to do, rather than just trying to do something quickly for the sake of doing something. So yes, it does take a little bit of time, but the good news is we're part of the conversation. We are in there having this dialogue. So when we look at this, it is the twin, impacts, highest COVID rates in Marin County, as well as overcrowding. That is why these two census tracts, that's why we are doing, this is a big deal. Housing or rent freeze, I personally, I'll speak for myself, I don't take this lightly. I'm a big believer in the free market. I'm a believer in having government interfere the right amount and not too much. And so I have thought a lot and had a lot of conversations with stakeholders all the way around, and I've been gratified to be a part of the Canal Policy Working Group to have those conversations and commit to continuing to have them and being methodical. I appreciate the conversation around the 12 months versus 6 months. I had the same question when the staff report came out. For me, I would support the year, even though I recognize we could do 6 months and then extend it, because I believe it sends a message to our community and says, this is important to us. We get that recovery is going to take longer. And even though I like the seamlessness and the tidiness of aligning with the county, to me, the community message is far more important. The fact that people are suffering, just say, hey, you get a little bit more breathing room. That is why I would support the staff report, the staff recommendation. On the other piece of, and then we can go to a motion unless there are additional comments. Assistant City Manager Lilovich, would you want to, is there any additional text regarding the clarification around the rent language? Because I do want to make sure this is a tight, specific to the COVID impact that we're addressing.
Yeah, thank you, Mary Kate. So Nira and I have been working on some language to amend section 4. Her recommendation is that we add at the end, so I'll read it through and then I'll qualify where there's additional language. So rent means the consideration including any funds, labor, bonus, benefit, or gratuity demanded or received by a landlord for or in connection with the use and occupancy of a rental unit and the housing services provided therewith, or for the assignment of a rental agreement for a rental unit. A decrease in housing services is considered an increase in rent, except, and here's the additional language, except state or local orders maintaining discontinuation of certain housing services. So that's the language. I'll let Nira speak to the logic behind it.
Oh, okay, it looks pretty straightforward the way that it was written.
Yeah, it essentially covers what Councilmember Bushy mentioned, which is that in instances in which housing services are required to be decreased per state order, specifically those related to COVID health and safety orders, that this would ensure that that would not constitute an increase in rent.
Okay. Vice Mayor Bushy, does that satisfy the clarification that you were hoping to seek?
It does, and Madam Mayor, if you're ready for a motion, I'm ready to make one.
Okay, unless there's further comment, I would be ready to entertain a motion.
Okay, with the addition of the revision proposed, read aloud moments ago, I move that we adopt the resolution as put forward by this in the staff report.
I'll second. Councilmember Bushy, if I may, it's going to be an urgency ordinance, and if we could read the entire title of the ordinance, of the urgency ordinance.
Let me get to the top here, the whole thing. All righty.
Yeah,
An urgency ordinance of the City Council of the City of San Rafael enacting a temporary moratorium on rent increases for tenants residing in certain residential units and in U.S. Census tracts most disproportionately impacted by COVID-19 and setting forth the facts constituting such urgency.
Okay, does your second stand with that clarification, Councilmember Gulati?
Yes, I'll second that.
Been moved and seconded. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Bushy.
Aye.
Councilmember Kurtz.
Aye.
Councilmember Yorenz Galati. Aye. Mayor Kate.
Aye. That motion carries 4-0, and it needed to carry 4-0 in order to pass. So thank you all for that discussion. Before we take a break, I did want to mention we are on the city website going to put up additional information regarding mental health. This is affecting all aspects of our community, not just the people that phoned in tonight. And so we will work with the city to have those resources readily available to people during this time. So we are going to take a 5-minute break. So you got to start your timer. You can go to off video, and we will reconvene with public hearing 6B, item 6B at that time.
we're ready to go live.
Welcome back after that short recess. Thank you all for being flexible as we manage Zoom meetings during the time of COVID and still doing the city business. Before we get to agenda item 6B, there was a public comment that came in later from open time in the very beginning of the meeting. So if Madam City Clerk could read that into the record.
Thank you. This is from Jean and David Ross. Dear Mayor and City Council members, in regards to the proposed driveway closure at 3rd and Lindaro, I've had a bit more time to research the information on the Public Works website. I've emailed Bill Guerin at the Public Works Department and also Mayor Kate Collin about where the information justifying the closure is shown. I have not had a response from either as of writing this letter. There's a section of the Public Works website under the 3rd Street Corridor Rehabilitation and Safety Improvements page called Project Documents. Here you can find PDFs of the presentations given at the August 25th, 2020 Community Working Group meeting and the September 23rd, 2020 community meeting. The August 25th meeting PDF doesn't show any reference to the driveway at 3rd and Lindaro being closed. However, on the September 23rd meeting PDF, it is shown on page 21 as a graphic only, no text calling attention to the proposed closure. The graphic is labeled intersection enhancement. This label says to me that the improvements are proposed to the intersection, similar to the document shown in the 3rd Street Rehabilitation Final Report dated June 3rd, 2019, not a closure. This graphic, due to its lack of text pointing out the closure of the driveway, is misleading. Now I ask you, is it reasonable to assume that poorly titled graphic included in a community meeting approximately 1 month prior to the City Council is asked to approve this considered adequate notice to the community? I say it is not. There's no information justifying why this driveway is now being shown closed, no reference to comments generated by the August 25th community meeting giving a reason for the closure, and no traffic study showing how traffic will be affected on the surrounding streets and the intersections because of this closure. The staff report from Public Works generated November 2nd meeting has one sentence for referencing the driveway closure. I know from personal experience that staff reports are usually generated about 3 days before the City Council meetings. So again, there's very little chance that someone from the public has access to this recommendation before meeting occurs. The staff report does not seem to be included in the Public Works website. A person who attended the meeting may not have caught this change. If they happen to attend the September 23rd meeting, because there's no text on page 21, intersection enhancement, graphic calling for this intersection to be closed, I asked you all to reconsider the approval you've granted, as clearly the public, let alone the surrounding businesses, did not have adequate notice of the intent to close this driveway. A traffic study should be conducted and reviewed to determine how the adjacent streets will be impacted by the proposed closure before anyone agrees to it. And again, I'd like to see a documentation as to why the driveway should be closed. The public cannot adequately comment or provide feedback when the reasons for the closure impacts the surrounding streets have not been provided to them. And the second comment that was received was from Satber Handal. Happy New Year. I'm a Sanitary business owner. My staff and I frequent Walgreens area located at 3rd and Lindaro Street. And I have significant safety concerns that the permanent driveway closure will decrease overall pedestrian, bicyclist, and motorist safety, increase frequency of pedestrian vehicle encounters at nearby intersections, increase pedestrian vehicle and vehicle collision potential, create dangerous traffic patterns or choices for motorists, create unsafe conditions in the lot, which is not designed for only one exit, increase traffic congestion on adjacent streets, including 3rd and 4th, Seahouse and Luton's, remove parking on Luton's Place, be bad for local businesses. Please do not permanently close the driveway to the public parking lot adjacent to Walgreens at 3rd Street and Lindaro Streets. Blocking any road artery puts pressure on other road arteries. If the reason to close is to not let through traffic using the parking lot, a couple of speed bumps strategically placed at the entrance from Luton's and exit from parking lot and the Walgreens parking area may be a simpler solution. It may solve the issue by discouraging through traffic that is using the parking area to get to Lindaro Street. And that concludes public comment. And thank you, Mayor Kate.
Thank you. And just to clarify, that was being read into the record. That was an item not on our agenda this evening. And I will just encourage everyone who's still watching to subscribe to the City Manager Snapshot, so you will always know upcoming agenda items as well as what was decided at the council meeting. Okay, with that and no further ado, we'll turn it over to staff to discuss the Marin Sanitary Service rates and fees for 2021. Welcome Sustainability Director Corey Bidoff. Or is it Garth? I'm not sure who I'm turning it over to.
Hi, I'll start and then we'll have Garth assist. Thanks very much, Mayor and Council. Thanks for your time tonight. And I will see if I can share my screen, and it looks like I can. So there you go. Can you see that okay?
Yes, we can.
Great. Excellent. So let's see, slideshow, there we go. So thanks for your time tonight. This is our annual obligation to set rates for Marin Sanitary Service, for refuse and recycling services, for all residents and commercial customers in San Rafael. Rates are set for the calendar year, so this is a retroactive rate request. This happens every once in a while. We got a little behind this year for a variety of reasons, and but we'll be back on track next year. So I'll give an overview of the presentation tonight. Garth and I are going to trade off. We're going to dive into the 2021 rate review, which Garth Schultz at R3 Consulting Group is our third-party independent contractor that reviews those rates using the agreed-upon methodology with Marin Sanitary. And then I'll dive into the illegal dumping pilot program briefly. Then Garth will come back and delve into the refuse vehicle impact fee analysis. Then we'll open up the public hearing and you'll have the option to vote on 2 resolutions, one for refuse vehicle impact fee and one for Marin Sanitary Service rates for 2021. So a little background on this. The state allows cities to regulate refuse service, and we have one contractor, that's Marin Sanitary Service, that we contract with. We work with all the other jurisdictions in Marin, including San Anselmo and Fairfax and Larkspur, the County of Marin, and others that all contract with Marin Sanitary Service. And we work together to achieve economies of scale, to reduce costs. For instance, we hire R3 to do one rate review for all the jurisdictions. It saves a lot of staff time, saves a lot of costs, and then it also ensures that we have similar programs and a similar way of doing things across jurisdictions, since people work and live typically in different places.
Hey, Corey,
yep.
Corey, sorry, may I ask that you slow your comments down? Thank you so much.
My pleasure, thank you. So the annual rate setting is a contractual agreement with Marin Sanitary Service to set this every year. And it's based on a rate setting methodology that Council adopted in 2018 that went into effect in 2019. Garth will go into that a little bit more, but basically it was to streamline and simplify the process, make it easier to understand for the public, council, and staff alike, and to deal with rate fluctuations that were happening due to significant changes in recycling markets, which were going up and down wildly. And a little bit on Marin Sanitary and their operations. So a lot of people consider them the garbage company. They consider themselves a resource recovery operation. And the idea is to keep things out of landfill. How do we make things have another life in some way? All the way up to extended producer responsibility, trying to get things to be taken back by companies, all the way down to composting and recycling. So if you put it in a landfill, it's done. If you put it in a compost, you can actually get some compost or mulch out of it. And then increasingly, there are partners with complying with state legislation and our climate action goals. There's more and more state legislation to keep materials out of landfill, especially organic materials that decay, then turn into methane, which is much more impactful in terms of the climate than carbon dioxide. A couple of the quick things we often think about are carts at our homes, but residential service is only 1/2 of what they do. Commercial service is the other half, and that's big dumpsters and things like that. And then finally, in our biannual resident satisfaction survey, Marin Sanitary Service usually comes in very high, usually in 2nd or 3rd place behind fire and library services. So they have recognized value in the community. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Garth, and then Garth will tell me when to move the slides.
Great, thank you, Corey, and good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council members. Happy New Year and nice to see you. I'm Garth Schultz. I'm with R3 Consulting Group, and as Corey introduced, we provide a consolidated rate review service on behalf of the 7 Marin Sanitary Service member agencies, with San Rafael serving as the lead contracting entity. We don't work for Marin Sanitary Service. We are your agents and representatives of ratepayer interests in this process. So we're not the garbage company, but we do work well with them and understand their operational and cost center issues. Next slide. As a brief bit of background, there's a new methodology that was approved by the council, which started in 2019 for an annual indexed rate adjustment methodology. And this was adopted as the result of a couple of years of work and interest by the city and the Marin Franchisers Group, which is the several agencies that work together collaboratively on rate and contracting and program issues with Marin Sanitary. The group had an intention prior to adoption of that methodology to put together something that was streamlined, more simplified, and less costly. And this is the 3rd year of results under that new methodology. And we're happy to say it seems to be meeting the marks on all 3 of those points. It's largely tied to an external Bureau of Labor Statistics index. It's a CPI for water, sewer, and trash. It's a national index. And about 2/3 of the rates paid to Marin Sanitary Service are for their collection compensation. So that's for their direct operations in the community, collecting garbage, recycling, organics, providing illegal dumping support, providing bulky item pickups, a variety of services directly to residents and businesses. And that component of the rate via this new methodology isn't tied to their changes in expenses. It's tied directly to this index, the WST. And for this year in 2021, that index is 2.91%. So about 2/3 of the rate is going up just over 2.9%. The remaining 1/3 of the rate is for externalities, including processing, disposal, recycling, and government fees. And the rates overall via this methodology have become more predictable and stable and addresses fluctuations in most of these externalities. As Corey referenced, recycling markets in the past, the methodology smooths out those fluctuations and controls for them, while also sharing in the risks and reward of potential recovery in the recyclables markets, which has taken a dive in recent years. Next slide. Over the indexed rate review methodology, and this is the subject of our report, which is attached to the council packet, MSS calculated and we concurred with a 3.64% overall increase in rates prior to the other 2 items listed on the slide. And those, as you'll hear more in subsequent slides, are for a discretionary funding matter for continuing the illegal dumping pilot program, which would add 0.3% to the rates, and then an increase to the refuse impact fee, which Marin Sanitary Services pays to the city, which is about 1.55%, for a total rate increase shown here of 5.49. Thinking of this in kind of broad terms, about 1/3 of this year's increase is just to that CPI increase to Marin Sanitary Services compensation, which I showed on this prior slide. A little less than 1/3 of this year's increase is due to changes in government fees and extraordinary items, such as an increase in insurance for Marin Sanitary Services recycling facility and other regulatory items related to state law. There's a small percentage due to other factors such as recycling, processing, disposal, changes in profit calculations with changes in other expenses and interest, and that's fairly small. It also includes the illegal dumping pilot program. And less than 1/3 of the change would be for the change in the refuse impact fee, which again is discussed in later slides. Next slide, Corey, please. So that's the brief overview snapshot of what the 2021 rate recommendation is. It's important for council and the community to be aware there are some other items on the horizon coming up for 2022. One of those is the phasing out of prior true-ups that were complicating factors and somewhat non-intuitive in the prior methodologies, as in both those true-ups and the amortization of prior losses in recycling revenue, which were resolved with Marin Sanitary in 2017 and 2018, wherein this 2021 year represents the third and final year of paying those down and paying them off, and those will no longer be included in the rate base going forward. And that's a savings on the rates for San Rafael of around $137,000 starting in 2022. Unknown as of yet are impacts related to COVID-19. And those are aspects that we do anticipate there may be some impacts, as there are throughout the state and the world. We don't know the ramifications or magnitude of those yet, but we are working to evaluate and hopefully resolve and understand those very soon, well in advance of the 2022 rate setting time horizon. As you'll hear later in the presentation, there is an intention and a hope for longer term illegal dumping programs. So essentially, permanency for the pilot programs that have been engaged in over the last couple of years, which may affect the rates in the future, but not necessarily in large ways. And then there's new costs, both for a planning study and then implementation of state law SB 1383, which again we'll cover in later slides. But it is important for the council and the community to be aware that those are upcoming for 2022. Next slide, please, Corey. Now, briefly on SB 1383, and some of you may have heard about this in past presentations. This is a new landmark state law that was passed and signed into law in 2016, which targets removal of organic materials. So yard waste, green waste, food scraps, food soiled papers, and wood, anything that can break down in a landfill and create methane. The state has targeted those under AB 32 as an important greenhouse gas reduction strategy. So via this state law, the state has set statewide goals for reductions to landfill, but it also set specific programmatic and administrative duties that all agencies in the state must undertake, including updating solid waste ordinances via the municipal code, providing enforceability of a requirement to subscribe to organic service as residents and businesses, and fine those that do not comply beginning in 2024. San Rafael and the other Marin Sanitary Service jurisdictions have an intention of moving forward collaboratively, working together for an area-wide approach to SB 1383, both making that a cost-effective planning and study effort, but then also consistent between the jurisdictions. And the target date for this effectiveness of the law is January 1, 2022. There have been some pushes by agencies throughout the state to try to leverage CalRecycle, the state agency with responsibility for the regulations, to relax that date. My understanding is CalRecycle does not have that authority, but there may be some legislative avenues going forward in 2021. Importantly, related to SB 1383, for any agency that isn't in compliance with the law and that the state finds is not in compliance, those agencies can be fined up to $15,000 a day for non-compliance starting in January 1, 2024. So now really is the time to move forward with the city and the other agencies covering their obligations under that law. And that effort will be proceeding very soon. Next slide, please. Actually, back to you, Corey.
Thank you, Garth. So now we'll get into our illegal dumping pilot program a little bit. So we started this pilot actually in 2018, and here's some of the data that sort of drove us to the paint to try to understand it a little better and deal with it better. We have over 300 complaints a year. That doesn't take into account all of the dumping that happens. That's just the complaints that happen. Our public works crews, streets crews spend one full day a week plus picking up illegal dumping. The direct cost to the city is over $250,000 a year in staff time and resources. If you take into account all the private property that gets dumped on and the impacts on them, the downtown streets team time, and a lot of the other time and efforts that are being put into it by other entities, it's well over that. And all those materials really get landfilled. So what we're trying to do is get at that, understand who are the dumpers. We've kind of identified casual and illicit dumpers. Casual are the folks that just kind of put it on the street, hope somebody takes it, city might take it away. And the illicit are the folks that load up a truck, they know what they're doing, they dump on somebody's private property or at the end of the street. And what we also realize is that people in multifamily units don't have access to bulky waste item collection. They can use their dumpster, but single family residents get twice a year a bulky waste item pickup. If you live in an apartment complex and you don't have the cash and you don't have the transit, then those are two significant obstacles to having it picked up. So that's one of the things that we hope to resolve in our long-term recommendations is that inequity. So as I mentioned, this is a Together San Rafael Learning Lab project. It's cross-departmental. It's cross-jurisdictional. We've been engaging other jurisdictions as well. To date, we've done 3 bulky waste disposal events at Pickleweed Park in conjunction with Conservation Corps. We also piloted a free voucher program last year for tenants in apartments where we sent coupons directly to people. We also gave free dump vouchers or coupons to commercial victims of illegal dumping. But what we suffered for was the same that a lot of things did, is that COVID made it very challenging for us in several respects. One of which was that our outreach in person was really challenging to do. And the other is that people's attention wasn't really on this with many other things that were very important for them to pay attention to instead. So we didn't get the results. We didn't get the data. We weren't able to really fulfill the pilot, but we also have almost a half of the funds left over to be able to apply to the next year. So what we did do is we tried to make lemonade out of lemons. And we did a lot of research. We got to talk to a lot of other cities. My fellow was able to work a lot on this when he started with us in September. We expanded our team. We just, for instance, just met with the district attorney and Supervisor Bordoni on a program to deal with enforcement and to look for other methods of enforcement that are more along the lines of restorative justice. We've applied a carrot and stick approach with businesses that allow materials to build up on their property and cause a lot of complaints, where we offer a pre-site as well as a free dump coupon. We started a new tracking app. There's a great online story map now at cityofsanrafael.org/dumping. Shows everything that we're doing around it right now. We're getting some money from the Mattress Recycling Council through turning in mattresses. And then we decided to set a big goal to reduce illegal dumping 50% by 2025, because people work better when they're afraid, or when they're really enthused, I should say. So people got really enthused about this, and all the departments are very excited about having something big and bold to shoot for. So the pilot for 2021 is basically, again, to carry over some of that funding that's left over, add a little bit more to it, do a lot of the things that we've been doing, increase our engagement and our outreach with a lot of new tools that we've learned from other jurisdictions, as well as through our engagement with communities to understand better what works, to provide mini grants for businesses to prevent illegal dumping through environmental design, things like motion sensor lighting, surveillance cameras with signage, simple ways of blocking off your property so a truck can't drive up and dump. Gathering a lot of data and then developing solutions again for these different types of dumpers in these different areas. And I think the data gathering is going to be one of our biggest wins this year. Already DPW is out there with this new app and starting to really understand what is being dropped where, when, and we have some community members feeding us data and information as well. So let's see, I guess that's pretty much it. And I'll turn it back over to Garth for the refuse impact fee.
Thank you, Corey. And you can bring us to the next slide. Home stretch here. Thank you for being patient, council members. I don't typically have slides that are this wordy or that I read, but for this, it's important to understand the context. And so I may be repeating some of what you see in front of you here. Like many cities throughout the state, San Rafael has charged MSS an RIF, or refuse impact fee, for nearly 20 years. And that's to pay for the cost of, not if, impacts to city streets and roads. Garbage trucks are very heavy in comparison to most other vehicles on the roadways, and as a result have a much higher impact on street conditions compared to cars or even smaller trucks or delivery vans. Their payloads can be on the order of 4 or 5 tons a piece on top of what's already a very large and heavy chassis and body. As a matter of practice, RIFs need to be updated regularly because road conditions change over time. They can either improve if adequately funded or degrade if not adequately funded, as has actually been the case in recent years here in San Rafael. Information that can be updated within these studies also includes new traffic data, new methodologies and tools for collecting traffic data, and then also new calculation methodologies for the fee itself, as these approaches are developing and being amended over the course of time in order to get at more of the impact from these vehicles. Currently, and this has been in place since 2012, the rates that customers pay MSS include MSS's payment to the city of around $440,000 a year in an RIF. This amount is old and outdated and is thus due for an update at this time, which was the purpose of this study. Next slide, Corey. Now, this is a slide I didn't develop. It's sourced here from the MTC, but it paints an important picture around the need and opportunity for street maintenance funding. Essentially, on the left-hand axis, you see street and road quality compared to the number of years and payments for renovation. Ultimately, what this is showing is that when pavement condition and quality is good, it's cheaper to maintain than when it's degraded and poor. And right now, the city's pavement condition index, which is cited in a 2020 pavement management plan study that the city commissioned, not done by our firm, shows that index, that score, at around an at-risk to fair, and degrading over the course of the next 4 or 5 years. There's a very large unfunded backlog of street maintenance needs in the city, and current funding amounts aren't sufficient to catch up, and that maintenance backlog is in fact projected to grow over the course of time. And so through this update to the RIF, you have an opportunity to apply more funds to street maintenance and hopefully stem the degradation of streets, in particular residential streets. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we were engaged to conduct a study to update the RIF, and the results of that study, which are based on inputs of traffic data, information around MSS's fleets, as well as current city spending on street maintenance, and importantly, this unfunded backlog yields a justification for a value of up to $1.4 million and change. The primary reason for the increase from the prior value, which was cited on one of the prior slides, is due to the fact that this study accounts for the large amount of unfunded street maintenance backlog. And that's a new methodology and a new approach for studies like these, which was not addressed in prior studies. Prior studies simply looked at the amount of annual spending on street maintenance, which doesn't necessarily correlate to the need or the impact to the roadways. Because of the difference in magnitude, staff and R3 recommend adjusting this over time to smooth out the rate increase, basically taking a third of the gap each year over the course of the next 3 years. And doing so for this year, as you see, adds 1.55% to the rate increase. And based on what we know now, we can project that for 2022, that additional amount, that second third, would be an add of about 1.33% in 2022 and even less in 2023. And I believe that takes us out of this piece of the presentation. So thank you for your time. I'll be available for questions once Corey wraps us up.
Thank Thanks. So we'll just briefly summarize and then we can open it up for the public hearing. So here's the rate chart again, the impacts to the rate. With this recommendation, rates do remain in the average annual increase over the past 15 years. The illegal dumping pilot further and expands our multi-department and agency work, carrying over about half the funds, or not quite half the funds from last year. The refuse impact fee is recommended to be spread out over 3 years to reduce the impact on folks, but also with the realization that what that means then is foregoing those fees for years, so not getting the full fee in the first year. And refuse impact fees are typically done every 5 years so that you don't get behind, since they're not set on a percentage basis, they're set on a per amount basis. And it's been 8 years since the last time we did it. So we're definitely out of the range of updates here. Practically, what this rate increase means is about $2.38 per month for the common residential service, which is a 32-gallon cart of garbage and then as much recycling and composting as you need, for a total of $45.75 per month. And a $29.41 increase for the most common commercial service, which is a 3 cubic yard dumpster pulled once a month, which is a total of $565.14 a month. Noting the comments that were in the earlier presentation and also an inquiry that we had, I want to note that the increase is pretty minimal for multifamily units, and the impact on individual tenants is around the same, give or take, as it would be for a single family unit in the $2 to $3 range, depending on how much recycling there is. So these types of increases for multifamily units don't typically get passed down unless it's a duplex or some small number of units like that, where there's actually an arrangement where you divvy up the garbage service. So I just wanted to make sure that you knew that as well. And so here is a comparison for other Marin County jurisdictions, and San Rafael is on the far right. This is a residential comparison for residential refuse services. You can see that San Rafael is on, and for your consideration for these two options, the staff recommendation of a 5.49% retroactive to January 1st, spreading that refuse impact fee over 3 years. So that would be updating the master fee schedule with then establishing the Marin sanitary rates. And I want to note as well that Patty Garbarino and her staff from Marin Sanitary Service are on as well if you have questions for them. And then Rafael and Hunter Young from Public Works are on as well, because they're the ones that know the most about the road conditions and the road budget. So I will turn it over to you, Mayor Kate, for the public hearing.
Great. Thank you, Corey, and thank you, Garth. Before we go to the public hearing, are there any questions from my council colleagues? And maybe if you stop sharing the screen, if we need to see it again, we'll ask you, but otherwise I can't see everybody. There we go. Thank you.
Mayor Kate, may I swap our interpreters?
Oh, yes, that would be great. So while she's doing that, you can all think of your burning questions. I have to say it was a very thorough presentation, as well as the staff report, because this is complicated. So appreciate you really making it clear for us in our community.
We're ready. Thank you.
Okay. So do we have any questions? Vice Mayor Bushy, do you have any questions? No. Councilmember Kurtz.
I just have a question. First, thank you to Corey and Garth, and I think it was Christina who was on the call. We had a pre-meeting because it was so complicated to understand. So very, very helpful. I'm glad this was not the first time I got to hear all this. I have a question in terms of the communication. Who manages the communication to the community? Is it Marin Sanitary Service or is it the city?
It's both. We manage the communication mainly leading up to it, and then Marin Sanitary manages the communication after the rate goes into effect, and they send out a notice to all the bill payers. We post it to, of course, the snapshot, and we send it out to various agencies. We have a list of folks, including the Builders Exchange and the Chamber and the BID and places like that, that we send it out to ahead of time. So, yeah.
Would there be a cushion of time in that communication prior to seeing changes in their bill?
A cushion of time, meaning when we enact it and by the time that it comes to their bill, or
the proposal is effective January 1st, and just in terms of timing.
Maybe I should ask you to rephrase it. I'm not sure that I understand the question. Oh, Garth wants to answer though. Maybe he understands.
Yeah. I think it relates to the timing of when the bills would go out from Marin Sanitary Service. I think they'll be positioned to answer that question once it comes to any statements they might make, and we can prompt them on that. If the communications go out next week, I will believe there will be some cushion of time because it usually takes a while to get that into their billing queue, and they don't do all of them typically at once for San Rafael. I believe they're spread over a period of several weeks.
Okay, great, thank you. In my very unscientific survey of my neighbors, when I said, hey, probably going to see a rent increase in garbage, and they're like, oh, of course. It's great, we love our garbage, and we're really happy. So it was a very unscientific survey, but understandable from the community.
Great. Thank you. Councilmember Llorens-Pilati, do you have any questions?
No, I mean, I also wanted to thank for the report, but also I feel that we are so lucky in San Rafael to have such an amazing system that it doesn't just take care of our garbage, but also, does the composting, the recycling. So I was just thinking about the communications around, I love the program with the illegal dumping because it is such a huge problem. So I really love that program. And I can also see in our underserved communities, people that may not have a truck to be able to dispose of big items, that's a real problem. So my question was very similar to Rachel's around communications. How do we communicate with the community in the underserved community? Because I understand the communications in the business, but like with our consumers, around those type of programs?
Yeah, so that is the biggest challenge, especially in multifamily units. They're not bill payers, so they don't get the notices. And as we mentioned, we struggled a lot with communications throughout the pandemic. So here's one idea that we got from Long Beach, and that was putting big stickers right on the dumpsters and the recycling containers that give information to people. Hey, do you need a dump voucher? Scan this square or contact this number. So things like that. So there are a variety of ways, and by necessity, we have to do engagement in a lot of different ways to get a lot of different people because everybody receives their information differently. So food pantries, we've done that. Those right now, of course, that we get to a lot of people that way as well, using our community-based organization partners, Canal Alliance, Multicultural Center Marin. We do presentations periodically at the Canal Community Resilience Council. We've worked through First Five, and we have talked about but haven't really done a lot working directly through schools, but again, through First Five at Villa Vista School and things like that. So there's a variety of ways, and we're continually uncovering more and open to more input on that for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm now going to open the public comment, and I know if Patty Garbarino is on, it'd be lovely to have her maybe speak to some of the question that came up as well. Oh, wow, you really are on. I thought you were going to call in, but no, we have camera.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I want to include you in this our portion of this presentation. I want to introduce you to my dear colleagues. Justin Wilcock is taken over as our Director of Operations, coming out of communications, coming out of our contract up in Windsor as well, and he's doing a phenomenal job, as is Jason Raleigh, who is also new, comes to us from the pharmaceutical industry and also a rock star and doing a phenomenal job as our CFO as well, so he can answer any financial questions. I want to thank Garth and the staff for their presentations as well and for working with us through this process. It's been refreshing to not minimalize it, but breath of fresh air to move to this form of revenue analysis and rate model. It is vastly different than it was before, far easier to explain to the public and transparent and clear and sustainable. So thank you very much. I'm going to turn it over to Justin, who's going to talk about communications and how we get the word out to our customers. And we're available to answer any other questions for you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Justin.
Thanks, Patty. Thank you, Mayor Kate and Council. We feel that communication is very important as community members. We appreciate the relationship we have with the community, and we want to keep that goodwill up, and that's done through our communication through our customer service center and ensuring that our customer service reps are educated and updated on the information that they provide. I'd say traditionally in our industry, communication has happened through billing inserts. And that's not the most effective way to get information out, because as we know, you get a bill with 3 or 4 inserts and you maybe open it, maybe look at the bill and maybe look at 1 or 2 of the inserts. So we've really tried to focus and shift to more online virtual communication. Pre-COVID and COVID helped accelerate that as well. And so we're looking at ways that we can more effectively communicate through online means, whether it's our website or social media. We have a growing social media presence and find that that's a great way to get information out to the public. Making sure that all of our communities have opportunity to understand the information and knowing that a large component is Spanish speaking. We've tried to ensure that our information is available in English and Spanish. And you know what, I think one of the great benefits is that by being on social media and other online outlets, we can track how much response we're getting, how much traffic we're getting, and seeing if that really is effective communication. So, you know, we continue to look at how we can more effectively communicate, not just things like rate increases, but all of our programs encouraging resource recovery and management of the materials that we collect.
Thank you, Justin. That's good to have that, getting to see all the different avenues. And I have to say, I try to look at my bill insert, but yeah, I'm probably one of those that quickly take a look. So definitely benefit from the other ways that we can get information. So appreciate you being here in case any additional information or questions come up. So thank you. With that, Madam City Clerk, are there additional public comment?
Yeah, thank you. To comment on Zoom, please use the raised hand feature. And if you're commenting by phone, please press *9. And once you've heard a notification that the host is inviting you to speak, you'll need to press *6 to unmute yourself. As a reminder, we've asked that everyone participating tonight, please speak slowly to allow our interpreter to effectively express our comments. And if you're submitting comments on YouTube, please write public comment in advance of your message. We do have a comment.
Good evening. This is Bill Carney with Sustainable San Rafael. Good to see you all. We very much support the city's intention, as outlined in the staff report, to move forward this year with finalizing plans for mandatory organic waste diversion in accordance with SB 1383. Reducing methane emissions by keeping organics out of the landfill is, of course, an important step towards curbing climate change. And this is one portion of San Rafael's greenhouse gas footprint that we can actually effectively regulate at a local level, as outlined in the city's Climate Change Action Plan 2030, where the steps are all right there to follow up on this. We've got growing amounts of biomass entering the waste stream from wildfire prevention vegetation management, so the need is increasing. However, the opportunity is also increasing if the carbon content of kitchen cuttings and landscape trimmings together can be composted to enrich our soils around Marin, and also processed to generate power and produce biochar, then we should be able to actually both minimize emissions and also optimize carbon sequestration, which fits very well with what the countywide drawdown Marin program to get us to zero net greenhouse gases. So very important stuff. And a significant part of the effort is to require that apartment buildings provide adequate green bins as well as tenant education for organic materials and to service them at sufficient frequencies. So Sustainable San Rafael stands ready to assist the city in its discussions with R3 and with MSF on how best to implement SB 1383. We look forward very much to being included in that important work going forward. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you for your offer to have Sustainable San Rafael help in those efforts, because it will be all hands on deck, that is for sure. So thank you. Are there additional comments, City Clerk?
Yes.
Okay.
1 moment. This is a submitted comment. If it was a rent increase or a loan payment increase, we would require 30 to 60 days notice. Why can we not decide this in early October each year so that there is appropriate notice to the community and ratepayers? Thank you, Randy Dodd. And that concludes public comment.
Thank you. So before I close public comment, is it Justin? Jason that I put on the spot? I think it's Jason, one of you. Maybe just speak to the timing of it, and I to answer the community question would be great.
The timing of the notifications?
The timing of the rate increase. I mean, yeah. Just any insight and.
Yeah, that and that is something we've actually spoken with Corey about, trying to move that earlier in the year prior, so that there is notification that we're not doing a retroactive like we will be doing in this case. And I think as far as notifications for this specific rate increase, we will be putting it out through the inserts. One of the current limitations with social media is that we can't really target who it's going to. So all of our customers have access to that social media, and so to say this jurisdiction has a rate increase at this point versus another, it gets a little bit more challenging there. But so this notification will go out as a letter in the insert due to the close nature to the actual billing.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. So I'm going to close the public comment and bring it back to the council for either additional questions or some comments before we entertain a motion. Any additional questions? I don't see any. I will comment that having these unfunded mandates, SB 1383, that is an unfunded mandate from the state, and we take it, obviously we take it seriously, and we have to figure out a way to address that. So I understand why this is being brought forward, and I am grateful for community-based organizations like Sustainable San Rafael that can help us. And I concur with what Councilmember Lorenz Gruvelati had said before about the illegal dumping pilot program. And I'm really grateful to Together San Rafael and that task force that you put together to really look at some of the best practices that are out there and some of the options. This is not a problem that's gotten smaller during COVID. It's gotten bigger for various reasons. And so it could not be more timely to have us do that. And then the final comment I'll say is that Marin Sanitary Service has been a tremendous partner to the city, incredibly visionary. And I think that really reflects our community values and being very innovative. And Corey started out the whole presentation by saying, people say they're garbage collectors. That's actually not what they do. That is part of what you do, but really a resource hauler. And I think having our community understand that when you put whatever it is, compostables or green or trash that goes in the landfill on your curb, it's taken care of by a company that's working hard to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. I think that's pretty amazing. So I did go first on the comments. Please feel free to add more, but I know I am respecting the hour. And as Councilmember Kurt said, this is not the first time that we've seen it, had discussions with staff on this. So additional comments. Yes,
I just have a few comments that cover a wide range of issues. I will pick up on your phrase though, unfunded mandate. Requiring entities to do something, but not providing them a means to pay for it. We are, pot, meat, kettle. We are doing that right now. We are telling landlords that they need to pay more for their refuse service that they receive. We have testimony from Sustainable San Rafael that we should be requiring them to do even more to recycle organics. That's another expense that we're heaping on landlords and denying them a way to recover those costs. That's an unfunded mandate. We're guilty of that. There's not a limitless pool that you can keep doing that in. So we need to think long and hard about what our vision is and what is the long-term system that can support that, because it's very short-sighted to think that we can be in that position. From that, I'm going to just segue around all of the little Marin sanitary issues that I have. Illegal dumping, we are bedeviled by that. It just has been such a problem. We have so many really great ideas, great programs, the businesses in East San Rafael, people working so hard, Public Works, God bless them for going out and the stuff they have to clean up. And I know Marin Sanitary is out there with their front end loaders as well, picking up things we don't want to describe. So I am definitely in favor of continuing that program and keeping our thinking caps on to come up with new and better ideas. And I will end where I began with a report on CMSA. The one thing I didn't hear about, and I always have to bring up when we talk about Marin Sanitary, is the food to energy program. The Marin Sanitary cooperation with CMSA collects leftover food from restaurants. So I don't know how much we have these days. It is brought to CMSA, put into our digesters, digested into methane, which is natural gas, which we burn in our CMSA burns in our cogeneration unit, makes electricity out of it, runs the plant, to power the plant, the wastewater treatment plant. We're almost 100% self-funded, self-generation, with self-generation, generating electricity to pump all of the water around the wastewater treatment plant. It's huge load. It's a tremendous use of renewable energy, the best, I think, certainly the largest in Marin County. So there we go. That's my end. And that brings us back to the proposal before us, which is the rate increase, including the vehicle damage fee, which Corey, great idea to spread it out over 3 years.
Thank you for those comments. Any additional comments, Councilmember Kurtz? Okay, Councilmember Gulati.
Yeah, well, I just want to detail everything you said because I know it's pretty late, but again, I just wanted to reiterate with Marin Sanitary, the part that I'm most impressed is the sustainability, the education component that they do, to the community, to our youth, because they are the ones that they are actually lecturing the parents, like that is actually recycling. And just to finish mentioning that the garbage, they pick up the garbage and we think, oh, we don't have garbage anymore, but it's there, it's not going away. And we have a huge problem accumulating garbage. So the less garbage you generate, the less you have to pay. So there are other ways that you can do it. You can compost, you can recycle now is not the solution anymore. It's not like, oh, we'll recycle that. So so really appreciate Marin Sanitary, what they do for sustainability, and that generating garbage is expensive and we have to pay for it. So there are other ways to reduce it, like all that packaging, and when you shop, you know, how you buy food that maybe doesn't have all the packaging that you have to throw away. So I just had to put a little plug in again for Marin Sanitary and all the work that they do for sustainability and also for education, and just figure out a way to keep educating our community and you know, making them understand how we can reduce that is not going anywhere. It's just polluting our world. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Yeah, excellent comments. So unless there's any additional comments or questions, I would entertain a motion. I see that there are two separate motions, two separate resolutions. So I'm sure they'll have to be taken separately.
I move that we adopt the resolution amending the master fee schedule, increasing the refuse impact fee to be effective retroactively to January 1st to 2021.
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded. Roll call, please. City Clerk.
Councilmember Bushy.
Aye.
Councilmember Kurtz.
Aye.
Councilmember Urans-Galati.
Aye.
Mayor Kate.
Aye. That motion carries 4-0. Next resolution.
I move that we adopt the resolution establishing maximum rates collected by Marin Sanitary Service for the refuse and recyclable material collection and disposal services to be effective retroactively to January 1st, 2021.
I'll second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Madam City Clerk, roll call, please.
Councilmember Bushy.
Aye.
Councilmember Kurtz.
Aye.
Councilmember Urans-Galati.
Aye.
Mayor Kate.
Aye. That motion carries 4-0. And thank you all for hanging in there. I'm sorry about the late hour, but you know, the good work happens late hour. So thank you so much to Corey, Garth, and all of you at Marin Sanitary. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the rest of you don't get to go yet. We're not quite done.
I'm ready with the motion when you
Too
are.
many people were waving at that one.
I'm ready with the motion when you are.
Okay. So we are going to convene as the San Rafael Successor Agency. Are there any items to be held from the consent calendar for comment? Not seeing any. We can open to public comment and receive vote.
Yeah.
Madam City Clerk, I guess I turn that over to you.
Thank you. If you're on the line and you wish to provide public comment, either raise your hand or press *9 or submit your comments on YouTube now. And I'm going to wait about 15 seconds. Looks like no public comment.
Okay, so I request a motion to approve the consent calendar. Oh, yes. I'm just doing the cheat sheet. We don't meet this group doesn't meet as much. Okay.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Secretary, call the roll, please.
Vice Chair Bushy.
Aye.
Member Kurtz.
Aye.
Member Urans-Galati.
Aye.
Chair Kate.
Aye, that motion carries 4-0. And with that, we will adjourn our excellent display of the democratic process tonight. Thank you all for participating. Stay safe out there, and we'll see each other next week.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.